The emergence of the Slavic peoples from the archaeological and linguistic shadows of prehistoric Europe represents one of the most complex puzzles in Indo-European studies. Unlike their Germanic or Celtic neighbours, who left clearer material traces and earlier written records, the Proto-Slavs developed in relative obscurity within the vast wetlands and forests of Eastern Europe, creating a distinct cultural identity that would eventually spread across nearly half the continent. The search for the Proto-Slavic homeland has consumed generations of scholars, with linguistic evidence providing the most compelling clues. Through painstaking reconstruction of common Slavic vocabulary and phonetic changes, linguists have traced the Proto-Slavic language back to its Indo-European roots, identifying a homeland situated in the marshy lowlands between the Vistula and Dnieper rivers. The Pripyat Marshes region, encompassing parts of modern-day Belarus, northern Ukraine and eastern Poland, emerges as the most likely cradle of Slavic civilization based on several crucial factors: the preservation of archaic linguistic features in this area, the distribution patterns of early Slavic hydronyms, and the archaeological continuity found in local material cultures. The linguistic reconstruction reveals that Common Slavic developed distinct characteristics that set it apart from other Indo-European branches. The language retained the Indo-European ablaut system while developing unique phonetic innovations, including the characteristic palatalization processes that would later distinguish various Slavic languages. Proto-Slavic speakers maintained a rich vocabulary related to wetland environments, with numerous terms for different types of marshes, swamps, and forest clearings. Their lexicon included specific words for honey gathering, beekeeping, and the processing of various marsh plants, indicating an intimate relationship with their boggy homeland. Archaeological evidence from the Pripyat Marshes region supports the linguistic hypothesis through the identification of several material cultures that likely represented Proto-Slavic communities. The most significant of these cultures emerged during the Late Bronze Age and Early Iron Age, showing remarkable continuity in settlement patterns and material production techniques. Excavations have revealed small, dispersed settlements typically located on elevated ground within the marsh landscape, consisting of semi-subterranean dwellings with wooden frameworks and clay-plastered walls. These structures, measuring between 12 and 20 square metres, featured central hearths with stone-lined fire pits and storage areas carved directly into the earthen floors. The Lusatian culture, flourishing between 1300 and 500 BC across much of present-day Poland and eastern Germany, provides crucial insights into early Slavic material development. Archaeological sites associated with this culture reveal sophisticated pottery traditions, characterized by distinctive urn-shaped vessels with geometric decorations. These ceramics display intricate patterns created through incision and impression techniques, featuring zigzag lines, hatched triangles, and spiral motifs that would persist in Slavic decorative arts for centuries. The Lusatian potters developed a unique firing technique that produced vessels with distinctive black surfaces and reddish-brown interiors, achieved through carefully controlled oxidation processes during kiln firing. Burial practices within Lusatian culture sites demonstrate complex beliefs about death and the afterlife. The predominant custom involved cremation, with burned remains placed in ceramic urns and buried in extensive urn fields. These cemeteries often contained hundreds of graves arranged in family clusters, suggesting strong kinship-based social organisation. Grave goods typically included personal ornaments such as bronze fibulae, arm rings and neck torques, along with miniature pottery vessels presumably intended for the deceased's journey to the afterworld. The presence of whetstones, knives and other tools in male graves indicates beliefs about continued activity and death, while female burials frequently contained spindle whorls and weaving implements. The Przeworsk culture, developing between 200 BC and 400 AD in the region between the Oder and Vistula rivers, represents another crucial phase in Proto-Slavic development. This culture emerged during a period of increased contact with Germanic tribes, and displays significant technological advances, particularly in metallurgy and agriculture. Przeworsk settlements were typically larger than their Lusatian predecessors, featuring rectangular timber houses with stone foundations and sophisticated drainage systems. These communities practiced mixed farming, combining cereal cultivation with cattle, sheep and pig husbandry, as evidenced by large quantities of animal bones and agricultural tools found in excavated sites. The material culture of Przeworsk communities reveals increasing social stratification and craft specialization. Metalworkers produced high-quality iron tools and weapons using advanced bloomery furnaces that could reach temperatures exceeding 1200 degrees Celsius. Archaeological evidence includes numerous examples of spearheads, axes and knives displaying sophisticated forging techniques, with some weapons featuring pattern-welded blades that required considerable skill to produce. The presence of specialized workshops within settlements indicates the emergence of full-time craftsmen who served not only their local communities, but also engaged in regional trade networks. Social organization among early Slavic communities appears to have been based on extended family groups or clans, with archaeological evidence suggesting relatively egalitarian structures compared to contemporary Germanic or Celtic societies. Settlement layouts typically featured houses arranged in loose clusters, rather than the hierarchical patterns seen in other Indo-European cultures. The absence of elaborate elite burials or monumental architecture suggests that Proto-Slavic society lacked the pronounced social stratification characteristic of their neighbours, though subtle differences in grave goods indicate some degree of status differentiation based on age, gender, and possibly specialised skills. Religious beliefs among Proto-Slavic communities centred on the veneration of natural forces and ancestor spirits, as reconstructed through linguistic evidence and later ethnographic parallels. The common Slavic vocabulary preserves numerous terms related to supernatural beings and ritual practices, including words for household spirits, forest deities, and water nymphs. Archaeological evidence for religious practices includes small clay figurines found in domestic contexts, possibly representing household gods or ancestor spirits, and ritual deposits in wetland areas containing pottery, metal objects, and animal remains. Shamanic practices likely played a central role in Proto-Slavic religious life, with linguistic reconstruction revealing terms for ritual specialists who mediated between the human and supernatural worlds. These individuals, known by terms related to knowledge and sight, apparently served as healers, diviners, and conductors of community rituals. Archaeological evidence for shamanic practices includes unusual burials containing individuals interred with collections of animal bones, antlers, and stone implements that may have served ritual functions. Some graves contain evidence of trepanation suggesting medical or spiritual practices involving skull modification. The veneration of natural features formed another crucial aspect of Proto-Slavic religious beliefs. Sacred groves, springs, and unusual rock formations served as focal points for community rituals, with archaeological evidence including votive deposits and ritual fires at such locations. The Proto-Slavic pantheon included deities associated with thunder, fertility, and the sun, as reconstructed through comparative mythology and linguistic evidence. These divine figures were typically conceived as anthropomorphic beings dwelling in natural settings rather than the elaborate mythological systems developed by other Indo-European peoples. Interactions with neighbouring peoples profoundly influenced Proto-Slavic cultural development throughout this formative period. Contact with Germanic tribes along the western boundaries of the Slavic homeland resulted in significant linguistic borrowing, particularly in the areas of warfare, metallurgy, and political organisation. Germanic loanwords in Common Slavic include terms for weapons, military leadership, and legal concepts, suggesting sustained contact that went beyond simple trade relationships. The influence of Baltic-speaking peoples who occupied territories immediately north of the Proto-Slavic homeland, appears in shared mythological concepts and similar approaches to landscape utilization. Both groups developed cultures adapted to forested wetland environments, with comparable techniques for marsh navigation, seasonal hunting patterns, and plant resource exploitation. Linguistic evidence indicates prolonged contact between Slavic and Baltic speakers, with numerous shared innovations in vocabulary related to agriculture, animal husbandry, and social organization. Perhaps most significantly, interactions with Iranian-speaking nomadic peoples from the Pontic steppes introduced Proto-Slavic communities to new technologies, religious concepts, and social practices. Archaeological evidence from the southern margins of the Slavic homeland reveals the adoption of certain steppe burial customs, including the construction of burial mounds and the inclusion of horse equipment in elite graves. Iranian loanwords in common Slavic vocabulary include terms related to divine authority, religious concepts, and certain agricultural practices, indicating cultural exchange that extended well beyond material trade. The Iranian influence appears particularly pronounced in the development of Proto-Slavic religious beliefs, with several major deities showing clear connections to Iranian mythological figures. The thunder god, whose name appears in various forms across later Slavic languages, shares characteristics with Iranian storm deities, while concepts of cosmic dualism between light and darkness reflect Iranian religious philosophy. These borrowed elements were thoroughly integrated into Slavic religious systems, creating syncretic beliefs that would persist throughout subsequent Slavic cultural development. Trade relationships with these neighbouring peoples facilitated the spread of new technologies and cultural practices throughout the Proto-Slavic homeland. Archaeological evidence includes imported goods such as amber from Baltic regions, metalwork from Germanic territories, and luxury items from the Black Sea trade networks. In return, Slavic communities exported forest products including furs, honey, wax, and possibly slaves, establishing economic relationships that would continue throughout the medieval period. The gradual expansion of Proto-Slavic communities beyond their original homeland began during the later phases of this period, driven by population growth, environmental changes, and pressure from migrating Germanic tribes. Archaeological evidence suggests that Slavic groups began moving eastward into the forest steppe zone and southward toward the Carpathian Mountains, carrying their distinctive material culture and settlement patterns into new territories. This expansion process, which would accelerate dramatically in subsequent centuries, established the foundation for the eventual Slavic colonization of vast areas of Eastern and Central Europe. The demographic explosion that transformed the Slavic peoples from a collection of marsh-dwelling communities into the dominant population across vast swathes of Europe began in earnest during the 6th century AD. This extraordinary expansion represented one of the most significant population movements in European history, rivaling the earlier Germanic migrations in scope and exceeding them in lasting demographic impact. Archaeological evidence from across Central and Eastern Europe reveals a sudden proliferation of distinctively Slavic settlement types, pottery styles, and burial practices appearing simultaneously across territories stretching from the Elbe river basin to the middle reaches of the Dnieper. The scale of this demographic transformation becomes apparent through systematic analysis of settlement densities across the affected regions. Excavations in Bohemia reveal that Slavic settlements increased from scattered, isolated sites in the early 6th century to dense networks of interconnected communities by 650 AD. Similar patterns emerge across Moravia, where archaeological surveys document the establishment of over 200 new settlements within a 150-year period. The Pannonian Plain witnessed an even more dramatic transformation, with Slavic communities establishing permanent settlements in river valleys that had remained sparsely populated since the departure of various Germanic tribes. The Slavic expansion manifested through three distinct directional movements, each characterized by unique settlement strategies and environmental adaptations. The westward movement into Central Europe represented the most complex of these migrations, involving the systematic colonization of river valleys and forest clearings across present-day Czech Republic, Slovakia, Eastern Germany, and parts of Austria. Slavic settlers moving westward encountered landscapes previously occupied by Germanic tribes, particularly the Langobards and various Suebi groups, whose departure for Italy and other Western territories created demographic vacuums that Slavic communities rapidly filled. Archaeological evidence from the Elbe River basin demonstrates the sophisticated nature of this westward expansion. Slavic settlers established their communities according to carefully planned patterns, typically choosing elevated terraces overlooking river floodplains while maintaining access to both agricultural land and transportation routes. Excavations at sites like Torno in Brandenburg reveal settlements featuring rectangular timber houses measuring 15 to 25 meters in length, constructed using advanced log building techniques that incorporated sophisticated joinery methods. These structures featured stone-lined cellars for food storage, central hearths with elaborate chimney systems, and separate areas designated for craft production activities. The pottery assemblages from these western settlements display remarkable uniformity across vast distances, indicating sustained cultural contact and possibly coordinated migration efforts. The characteristic Slavic pottery of this period featured hand-built vessels with distinctive rim profiles and surface treatments, including the widespread Prague-type ceramics that appear simultaneously across sites from the Elbe to the Danube. These vessels, typically fired in simple pit kilns at temperatures between 800 and 900 degrees Celsius, display consistent decorative motifs, including horizontal grooves, finger impressions, and occasional geometric patterns applied before firing. Burial practices in the Western Expansion Zone reveal the maintenance of traditional Slavic customs despite geographic displacement. Cremation remained the predominant mortuary practice, with burned remains typically placed in ceramic urns and buried in flat cemeteries located at the edges of settlement areas. Grave goods in these Western sites remained relatively modest, consisting primarily of personal ornaments such as bronze and iron fibulae, glass beads, and occasional pottery vessels. The absence of weapons in most graves contrasts sharply with contemporary Germanic burial traditions, suggesting that Slavic communities maintained their relatively egalitarian social structures during the migration period. The southward expansion into the Balkans represented the most militarily significant aspect of Slavic migration, bringing Slavic communities into direct contact with the Byzantine Empire and its complex network of client peoples. Historical sources, including the chronicles of Procopius and later Byzantine historians, document repeated Slavic incursions across the Danube frontier beginning in the 540 SAD. These initial raids evolved into permanent settlement movements by the late 6th century, as Slavic groups established communities throughout the Balkan Peninsula, despite Byzantine military resistance. Archaeological evidence from the Balkans reveals a settlement pattern distinct from the Western expansion, characterized by smaller, more dispersed communities that took advantage of mountainous terrain and river valleys for defensive purposes. Excavations in Serbia and Bulgaria document Slavic settlements typically consisting of 8 to 12 houses arranged in loose clusters, often positioned on elevated ground with natural defensive advantages. These communities practiced mixed subsistence strategies, combining small-scale agriculture with extensive pastoralism adapted to the mountainous Balkan environment. The interaction between Slavic settlers and existing Balkan populations created complex cultural dynamics that varied significantly across different regions. In areas where Thracian and Illyrian populations had maintained their traditional settlements, archaeological evidence suggests a gradual process of cultural assimilation rather than violent displacement. Mixed cemeteries containing both Slavic cremation burials and indigenous inhumation practices indicate sustained coexistence and intermarriage between communities. Pottery assemblages from these mixed sites display hybrid characteristics, combining Slavic vessel forms with decorative traditions derived from local Thracian and Illyrian ceramic styles. The absorption of indigenous Balkan populations by Slavic communities appears to have been facilitated by similarities in subsistence practices and social organisation. Both Slavic and indigenous communities practiced mixed farming with emphasis on cattle and sheep herding, utilised similar technologies for metalworking and pottery production, and maintained comparable settlement sizes and layouts. Linguistic evidence suggests that this cultural convergence resulted in the adoption of numerous Balkan substrate words into South Slavic languages, particularly terms related to topography, plant and animal species, and specialized crafts. The eastward expansion across the Russian plain represented the most extensive territorial movement of Slavic peoples, ultimately bringing Slavic communities into contact with Finno-Ugric populations throughout the forest zone of Eastern Europe. This expansion followed major river systems, particularly the Dnieper, Don, and Volga watersheds, which provided natural corridors for movement and settlement. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that Slavic settlers moving eastward maintained their traditional preference for riverine environments, establishing communities on elevated terraces that provided access to both aquatic resources and agricultural land. The settlement patterns established during the eastward expansion reveal sophisticated environmental adaptation strategies. Slavic communities in the forest zone developed specialized techniques for clearing woodland areas using controlled burning methods that maximize soil fertility while minimizing labor investment. Excavations at sites like Novgorod and Pskov document the use of advanced drainage systems that allowed agricultural production in previously unsuitable wetland areas. These communities also developed extensive networks of seasonal camps and resource extraction sites, enabling the exploitation of forest products across vast territories. The interaction between eastward-moving Slavic settlers and Finno-Ugric populations created unique cultural synthesis patterns that differed markedly from those observed in western and southern expansion zones. Archaeological evidence suggests that Finno-Ugric communities possess sophisticated technologies for exploiting forest and aquatic resources that proved highly attractive to Slavic settlers. The adoption of Finno-Ugric techniques for fur trapping, honey gathering, and seasonal fishing appears in Slavic archaeological assemblages throughout the eastern expansion zone. Linguistic evidence indicates extensive borrowing between Slavic and Finno-Ugric languages, particularly in vocabulary related to natural phenomena, seasonal activities, and specialized crafts. Finno-Ugric loanwords in East Slavic languages include numerous terms for forest animals, fishing techniques, and winter survival strategies, suggesting sustained cultural exchange and possibly intermarriage between communities. Archaeological evidence supports this linguistic data through the identification of hybrid material culture assemblages that combine Slavic pottery traditions with Finno-Ugric metalworking techniques and decorative motifs. Environmental factors played a crucial role in facilitating and directing Slavic expansion across Europe during this period. Paleoclimatic evidence indicates that the 6th and 7th centuries experienced relatively favourable climatic conditions, with warmer temperatures and increased precipitation that enhanced agricultural productivity and supported larger populations. Pollen analysis from across Central and Eastern Europe reveals extensive forest clearance during this period, corresponding to the establishment of Slavic agricultural communities in previously wooded areas. River systems served as primary corridors for Slavic expansion, providing transportation routes, defensive positions, and access to diverse environmental resources. The Danube River and its tributaries facilitated southward movement into the Balkans, while the Vistula, Oder, and Elbe systems enabled westward expansion into Central Europe. The Dnieper, Don, and Volga watersheds provided pathways for eastward movement across the Russian plain. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that Slavic settlers consistently chose settlement locations that maximised access to river transportation while providing defensive advantages and agricultural potential. The role of climate change in enabling Slavic expansion becomes particularly apparent through analysis of agricultural practices and settlement locations. Warmer temperatures during the 6th and 7th centuries extended growing seasons and enabled cultivation of cereals at higher latitudes and elevations than previously possible. Archaeological evidence from mountain valleys in the Carpathians and Sudetes reveals Slavic agricultural settlements at elevations that would become unsuitable for farming during subsequent cooler periods. Technological innovations developed during the migration period enhanced Slavic communities' ability to exploit new environments and establish permanent settlements across diverse landscapes. Archaeological evidence reveals improvements in agricultural tools, including the development of more efficient ploughshares and harvesting implements that enabled cultivation of heavier soils. Advances in construction techniques, particularly the refinement of log-building methods and the development of more sophisticated heating systems, allowed Slavic communities to establish permanent settlements in climatic zones that had previously supported only seasonal occupation. The displacement of Germanic tribes from Central Europe created demographic opportunities that Slavic communities rapidly exploited through systematic colonization efforts. Archaeological evidence suggests that this colonization process was organized and coordinated rather than random, with Slavic settlements appearing in optimal locations throughout formerly Germanic territories within relatively short time periods. The consistency of settlement patterns, pottery styles, and burial practices across vast distances indicates maintained cultural contact and possibly centralized planning during the expansion process. Water management technologies developed by Slavic communities enabled settlement in previously marginal environments, particularly wetland areas and river floodplains. Excavations reveal sophisticated drainage systems, including wooden channels, stone-lined ditches, and elevated walkways that allowed year-round occupation of flood-prone areas. These technologies proved particularly important in the Eastern Expansion Zone, where vast wetland complexes required extensive modification to support permanent agricultural settlements. The establishment of permanent Slavic settlements across the Balkan Peninsula inevitably brought these expanding communities into direct confrontation with the Byzantine Empire, whose northern frontiers had remained relatively stable since the late 5th century. The first documented encounter between Slavic forces and Byzantine military units occurred in 527 AD near the fortress of Sirmium, when a reconnaissance party of approximately 300 Slavic warriors probed the imperial defences along the Sava River. This initial contact, recorded in the fragmentary military dispatches preserved in the Constantinople archives, described the Slavic fighters as employing unfamiliar tactical formations and carrying distinctive weapons that differed markedly from those used by Germanic tribes. The siege of Thessalonica in 586 AD marked the first major military confrontation that demonstrated the evolving capabilities of Slavic military organisation. Archaeological evidence from recent excavations around the city's northern walls reveals the sophisticated nature of Slavic siege preparations, including the construction of wooden siege towers reaching heights of approximately 15 metres, and the deployment of torsion artillery pieces likely captured from earlier Byzantine defeats. The siege lasted 33 days, during which Slavic forces demonstrated remarkable coordination in maintaining supply lines stretching back to their base camps in the Rhodope Mountains, some 80 kilometres distant. Byzantine chroniclers, particularly John of Ephesus, recorded detailed observations of Slavic military tactics during the Thessalonica siege that reveal significant departures from traditional barbarian warfare methods. Slavic commanders employed systematic rotation of assault units, allowing fresh troops to maintain continuous pressure on specific sections of the city's defences, while exhausted units withdrew to prepared rest areas. The attackers constructed elaborate earthwork fortifications surrounding their own camps, complete with palisades and defensive ditches that protected their siege equipment from Byzantine cavalry sorties launched from the city. The weapons recovered from battlefield sites around Thessalonica provide crucial insights into Slavic military technology during this early contact period. Iron spearheads measuring between 25 and 35 centimetres in length display advanced forging techniques, with pattern-welded construction indicating sophisticated metallurgical knowledge. Slavic archers employed composite bows constructed from horn, wood, and sinew that generated significantly greater range and penetrating power than the simple wooden bows traditionally associated with barbarian forces. Arrow points recovered from the siege sites reveal standardized production methods suggesting centralized weapon manufacturing rather than individual craft production. The failure of the Thessalonica siege resulted not from Slavic military inadequacy, but from the arrival of a relief force commanded by the general Commentiolus, whose army included significant numbers of Avar cavalry that disrupted Slavic supply lines. Archaeological evidence from the abandoned Slavic siege camps reveals the systematic nature of their withdrawal, with carefully buried caches of weapons and equipment positioned for potential future recovery. These deposits, discovered during 20th century excavations, contained over 200 iron weapons, bronze fittings for siege engines, and ceramic vessels bearing inscriptions in an early Slavic script that predates the later Cyrillic alphabet by nearly 2 centuries. Following the Thessalonica siege, Slavic military activities shifted from large-scale assaults on fortified positions to systematic raiding campaigns that targeted the agricultural heartland of Byzantine Thrace and Macedonia. These raids, documented in numerous contemporary sources including the Chronicle of Monemvasia and various hagiographical texts, reveal sophisticated intelligence networks that enabled Slavic commanders to coordinate simultaneous attacks across multiple provinces. The raiders demonstrated intimate knowledge of Byzantine administrative schedules, timing their attacks to coincide with tax collection periods when rural communities possessed maximum portable wealth. The raiding campaigns of the late 6th and early 7th centuries established patterns of Slavic military organisation that would persist throughout the subsequent expansion period. Archaeological evidence from temporary Slavic camps scattered across the Thracian countryside revealed standardised layouts featuring central command areas surrounded by concentric rings of warrior quarters and support facilities. These camps typically accommodated between 500 and 800 fighters, along with their horses, camp followers, and accumulated plunder, suggesting raiding forces significantly larger than previously estimated by Byzantine chroniclers. The gradual transformation of Slavic raiding into permanent settlement began during the reign of Emperor Maurice, when prolonged Byzantine military campaigns against Persian forces in the east reduced imperial garrison strength along the Danube frontier. Archaeological surveys across modern Bulgaria and Serbia document the establishment of Slavic agricultural communities in areas that had been successfully defended against raiders just decades earlier. These settlements reveal careful site selection, with communities positioned to exploit river valleys while maintaining defensive positions in nearby hills and forests. The process of Slavicization in formerly Roman territories proceeded through complex interactions between incoming Slavic settlers and existing provincial populations, rather than simple demographic replacement. Excavations at sites like Karasingrad in Serbia reveal mixed communities where Slavic timber construction techniques were applied to building types derived from late Roman architectural traditions. Pottery assemblages from these transitional sites display hybrid characteristics, combining Slavic hand-building methods with vessel forms and decorative motifs derived from provincial Roman ceramic traditions. The survival of Latin-speaking populations in mountainous regions of Illyricum created linguistic islands that profoundly influenced the development of South Slavic dialects. Archaeological evidence from the Dinaric Alps reveals communities that maintained Roman-style stone construction techniques while adopting Slavic agricultural practices and settlement patterns. These populations, identified through distinctive burial practices that combined Roman inhumation traditions with Slavic grave goods, served as cultural intermediaries who facilitated the transmission of classical knowledge and administrative practices to Slavic communities. Byzantine responses to Slavic settlement evolved from initial military resistance to increasingly sophisticated diplomatic and administrative strategies designed to integrate Slavic communities into the imperial system. The establishment of the Theme of Thrace in 687 AD represented a fundamental shift in imperial policy, acknowledging Slavic demographic dominance while attempting to maintain political control through local administrative structures. Archaeological evidence from theme capitals like Philippopolis reveals the construction of new administrative buildings designed to accommodate Slavic tribal assemblies, alongside traditional Roman governmental functions. The recruitment of Slavic warriors into Byzantine military service began as early as 610 AD, when Emperor Heraclius incorporated Slavic cavalry units into his campaigns against Sassanid Persia. Military equipment recovered from Byzantine army camps in Anatolia includes distinctive Slavic weapons and horse gear, indicating the presence of substantial Slavic contingents within imperial forces. These mercenary units, known as foederati, received regular payments in gold solidi along with grants of land in Anatolia and other frontier regions distant from their Balkan homelands. Slavic military service within the Byzantine army introduced significant tactical innovations that influenced imperial warfare throughout the 7th and 8th centuries. The famous Strategikon attributed to Emperor Maurice describes Slavic fighting methods in detail, praising their effectiveness in forest and mountain terrain, while noting their reluctance to engage in open-field battles against heavy cavalry. Slavic tactics emphasized mobility, deception, and intimate knowledge of local terrain, with small units capable of operating independently for extended periods, while maintaining coordination with larger forces through sophisticated signaling systems. The integration of Slavic military units into Byzantine service created complex loyalty relationships that significantly impacted imperial politics during the 7th and 8th centuries. Archaeological evidence from military settlements in Anatolia reveals Slavic communities that maintained their traditional material culture while adopting Byzantine administrative practices and religious customs. These communities served as recruitment centers for subsequent military campaigns, while functioning as intelligence networks that provided crucial information about Balkan political developments. The establishment of Slavic archontates under Byzantine suzerainty represented another crucial development in imperial integration policies. These semi-autonomous political entities, governed by Slavic chiefs who received Byzantine titles and recognition, maintained traditional tribal structures while acknowledging imperial authority in matters of taxation and military service. Archaeological evidence from archontate centers like Skoplatos reveals the construction of fortified residences that combined Slavic timber construction with Byzantine defensive architecture, creating hybrid building types that reflected the complex political relationships between Slavic leaders and imperial authorities. The role of Slavic naval forces in Byzantine maritime operations remains one of the least understood aspects of this military relationship. Recent underwater archaeological discoveries in the Black Sea have revealed ship construction techniques that combine Slavic riverine boat-building traditions with Byzantine naval architecture. These vessels, measuring between 15 and 20 meters in length, featured shallow drafts suitable for river operations, while incorporating reinforced hulls capable of withstanding open sea conditions. The presence of distinctively Slavic pottery and weapons aboard these vessels indicates their use by Slavic crews in imperial service. The cultural impact of prolonged military contact between Slavic and Byzantine forces extended far beyond purely military matters. Archaeological evidence from Slavic settlements throughout the Balkans reveals the adoption of Byzantine craft techniques, particularly in metalworking and textile production. Slavic smiths began producing weapons and tools using Damascus steel techniques learned from Byzantine armourers, while Slavic weavers incorporated silk threads and complex patterns derived from imperial textile traditions. These technological transfers created distinctive hybrid material cultures that combined Slavic functional priorities with Byzantine aesthetic preferences. Religious conversion represented another crucial aspect of Byzantine integration policies towards Slavic populations. The establishment of bishoprics in Slavic territories, beginning with the creation of the Archbishopric of Justiniana Prima in 535 AD, provided institutional frameworks for systematic Christianization efforts. Archaeological excavations at early Slavic churches reveal architectural solutions that adapted Byzantine basilica designs to accommodate traditional Slavic assembly practices, creating interior spaces that could function both as Christian worship centres and as venues for tribal councils and community gatherings. The development of Slavic literacy through Byzantine missionary activities created new possibilities for administrative integration and cultural transmission. The invention of the Glagolitic script by Constantine Cyril in the 860s, specifically designed to represent Slavic phonetic systems, enabled the production of legal documents, administrative records, and religious texts in Slavic languages while maintaining compatibility with Byzantine bureaucratic practices. Archaeological discoveries of early Slavic manuscripts reveal the rapid adoption of this writing system across Slavic communities throughout the Byzantine sphere of influence. The economic integration of Slavic territories into Byzantine commercial networks transformed both Slavic subsistence practices and imperial trade patterns. Archaeological evidence from Slavic settlements reveals the increasing importance of specialized craft production for external markets, with communities developing expertise in particular products such as honey, wax, furs and metalwork specifically for trade with Byzantine merchants. The establishment of permanent trading posts at river confluences and mountain passes facilitated regular commercial contact, while providing venues for cultural exchange and diplomatic negotiation. The impact of Slavic demographic dominance on Byzantine provincial administration necessitated fundamental changes in imperial governance structures throughout the Balkan territories. The traditional Roman system of urban-centred administration proved inadequate for governing dispersed rural populations, organised according to tribal rather than municipal principles. Archaeological evidence from abandoned Roman cities reveals the systematic dismantling of urban infrastructure as administrative functions relocated to rural centres that better served Slavic settlement patterns and social organisation. The transformation of scattered Slavic tribal confederations into organised political entities marked a fundamental shift in European power dynamics during the 8th and 9th centuries. The emergence of centralised authority structures among Slavic populations represented not merely an evolution of existing social organisation, but a revolutionary adaptation to the complex geopolitical pressures exerted by the Frankish Empire, Byzantine Empire, and the expanding Avar Khaganate. Archaeological evidence from across Central and Eastern Europe reveals the sudden appearance of fortified centres, standardised administrative practices, and hierarchical settlement patterns that indicate the rapid development of state-level political organisation among previously decentralised Slavic communities. The earliest documented Slavic political entity emerged in the territories north of the Danube under the leadership of a Frankish merchant named Samo, whose remarkable rise to power in 623 AD fundamentally altered the balance of power in Central Europe. Contemporary Frankish chronicles particularly the Chronica Fredegari, describes Samo as a weapons trader who initially travelled to Slavic territories to conduct commercial transactions with tribal leaders. The chronic warfare between Slavic communities and Avar raiders created enormous demand for iron weapons and defensive equipment, providing Samo with both economic opportunities and intimate knowledge of Slavic military capabilities and political structures. The transformation of Samo from merchant to monarch occurred during a crucial military confrontation between Slavic forces and Avar cavalry units near the confluence of the Morava and Danube rivers in early 623 AD. Archaeological excavations at the presumed battlefield site have revealed evidence of a massive engagement involving thousands of combatants, with weapon deposits indicating the participation of at least 12 distinct Slavic tribal groups, fighting alongside smaller numbers of Frankish and Thuringian warriors. The battlefield archaeology reveals sophisticated tactical coordination among the Allied forces, with evidence of planned defensive positions and coordinated cavalry charges that suggest unified command structure rather than loose tribal alliance. Samo's elevation to leadership of this multi-tribal confederation appears to have resulted from his crucial role in organising the anti-Avar coalition and his demonstrated ability to coordinate military logistics across vast distances. The Fredegar Chronicle records that Slavic tribal leaders formally elected Samo as their king following the decisive victory over Avar forces, a political arrangement that represented an unprecedented departure from traditional Slavic governance structures. Archaeological evidence from presumed royal centres associated with Samo's realm reveals the construction of fortified compounds featuring timber palisades, stone foundations, and elaborate residential structures that combined Frankish architectural techniques with Slavic building traditions. The territorial extent of Samo's empire encompassed vast regions of Central Europe, stretching from the Bohemian Basin eastward to the Middle Danube Valley and northward into the Moravian highlands. Archaeological surveys have identified over 60 fortified sites dating to the 7th century that display consistent construction techniques and material culture assemblages suggesting unified political authority. These fortifications, typically positioned on elevated terrain overlooking river valleys and major transportation routes, featured sophisticated defensive systems, including multiple lines of earthwork ramparts, wooden palisades reinforced with stone foundations, and elaborate gate complexes designed to control access to interior courtyards. The administrative structure of Samo's empire reveals remarkable organizational sophistication for such an early Slavic political entity. Archaeological evidence from administrative centers indicates the development of standardized weights and measures, uniform pottery styles for official functions, and consistent metalworking techniques for producing weapons and tools distributed throughout the realm. Excavations at sites like Mikulcice in Moravia have uncovered workshop complexes featuring specialized production areas for different crafts, with evidence of quality control measures and standardized product specifications that suggest centralized economic planning. Military organization within Samo's empire represented a synthesis of Slavic traditional warfare methods with tactical innovations derived from Frankish and Avar military practices. Archaeological analysis of weapon assemblages from 7th century Slavic sites reveals the widespread adoption of standardized spear points, sword designs, and defensive equipment that enabled coordinated battlefield formations. The discovery of large-scale weapons caches at strategic locations throughout the realm indicates systematic military planning and the maintenance of regional armories capable of equipping substantial forces during periods of crisis. The confrontation between Samo's empire and the Frankish kingdom under Dagobert Vaz in 632 AD demonstrated the military effectiveness of organized Slavic resistance against Carolingian expansion efforts. The Frankish invasion force, estimated by contemporary sources at approximately 8,000 warriors, encountered unexpected resistance from Slavic defenders who employed sophisticated defensive strategies combining traditional forest warfare tactics with coordinated cavalry operations. Archaeological evidence from the presumed invasion routes reveals abandoned Frankish military equipment and hastily constructed fortifications that suggest a more prolonged and costly campaign than indicated in official Frankish chronicles. The siege of Wergastisburg, the principal fortress of Samo's realm, represented the climactic engagement of the Frankish-Slavic conflict and demonstrated the advanced defensive capabilities developed by Slavic military engineers. Archaeological investigations at potential Wergastisburg sites have revealed fortification systems of extraordinary complexity, featuring multiple defensive rings, underground tunnels for supply and communication, and sophisticated water management systems that enabled prolonged siege resistance. The fortress design incorporated lessons learned from both Byzantine and Avar siege warfare, creating defensive solutions specifically adapted to Central European terrain and climate conditions. The collapse of Samo's empire following his death around 658 AD resulted not from internal weakness, but from the fundamental challenge of maintaining political unity among diverse Slavic tribal groups without the personal authority that had enabled the Confederation's initial formation. Archaeological evidence reveals the continued occupation of major fortified centres throughout the former empire, but with significant changes in material culture and settlement patterns that suggest the fragmentation of centralised authority into smaller regional entities. The administrative infrastructure developed during Samo's reign provided crucial foundations for subsequent Slavic political formations, particularly in Bohemia and Moravia, where many organisational innovations persisted through periods of political transition. The emergence of the First Bulgarian Empire under Khan Asparukh in 681 AD represented a fundamentally different approach to Slavic state formation, involving the political synthesis of Turkic Bulgar military elites with Slavic agricultural populations in the lower Danube region. Archaeological evidence from the earliest Bulgarian centres reveals the systematic integration of Bulgar nomadic traditions with Slavic settlement practices, creating hybrid cultural forms that combined steppe political organisation with sedentary agricultural production. The Bulgars, numbering perhaps 15,000 to 20,000 warriors, along with their families and retainers, established political dominance over Slavic populations that outnumbered them by ratios of 10 or 15 to 1. The process of Bulgar-Slavic synthesis proceeded through carefully negotiated political arrangements that preserved Slavic community structures while establishing Bulgar military and administrative authority. Archaeological excavations at early Bulgarian centres like Pliska reveal the construction of massive earthwork fortifications enclosing areas of over 20 square kilometres, within which Bulgar administrative buildings coexisted with traditional Slavic residential quarters. The fortress complex at Pliska featured a central palace area constructed according to steppe architectural traditions, surrounded by craft workshops, military barracks, and residential districts that maintained distinctively Slavic building techniques and settlement layouts. The military organisation of the First Bulgarian Empire combined Bulgar heavy cavalry with Slavic infantry formations to create combined arms forces capable of confronting both Byzantine professional armies and nomadic raiders from the Pontic steppes. Archaeological analysis of weapons and equipment from Bulgarian military sites reveals the systematic production of standardised military equipment designed to outfit both cavalry and infantry units according to consistent specifications. Bulgar metal workers developed advanced techniques for producing composite armour that combined metal plates with leather and textile elements, creating protective systems suitable for the diverse combat roles required by the empire's military strategy. The administrative system established by the Bulgarian Khans represented an innovative synthesis of steppe political traditions with Byzantine governmental practices adapted to local Slavic social structures. Archaeological evidence from administrative centres reveals the development of written records using adapted Greek scripts to record Slavic and Bulgar languages, enabling the maintenance of tax records, legal documents, and military rosters across the diverse populations within the empire. The Bulgarian administrative system preserved traditional Slavic village assemblies while establishing regional governors responsible to the central authority, creating governmental structures that balanced local autonomy with imperial coordination. The expansion of Bulgarian territory under Khan Krum demonstrated the military effectiveness of the Bulgar-Slavic synthesis and established the First Bulgarian Empire as a major regional power capable of challenging Byzantine imperial authority. Archaeological evidence from Bulgarian military campaigns reveals sophisticated logistical capabilities, including the establishment of supply depots, the construction of siege equipment, and the coordination of naval operations in the Black Sea. The capture of Byzantine fortresses like Serdica and Adrianople required advanced siege techniques that combined traditional nomadic mobility with Slavic knowledge of local terrain and Byzantine defensive systems. The development of Great Moravia under Mojmir I beginning around 830 AD represented another distinct approach to Slavic state formation, emphasizing territorial consolidation and cultural development rather than military conquest. Archaeological evidence from early Moravian centres reveals systematic urban planning and the construction of elaborate religious and administrative complexes that rivaled contemporary Carolingian and Byzantine architectural achievements. The Moravian political system developed sophisticated diplomatic relationships with neighbouring powers while maintaining internal stability through effective integration of diverse Slavic tribal groups within a unified administrative framework. The territorial expansion of Great Moravia under Rastislav created a Central European power that served as an effective buffer between Frankish and Bulgarian spheres of influence, while developing independent cultural and political institutions. Archaeological surveys across the Moravian realm reveal the establishment of over 150 fortified centres connected by an extensive network of roads and communication systems that enabled rapid military mobilization and efficient administrative control. The Moravian fortification system incorporated lessons learned from both Carolingian and Byzantine military engineering while adapting defensive designs to the specific geographical and strategic requirements of Central European warfare. The invitation of Byzantine missionaries Constantine Cyril and Methodius to Great Moravia in 863 AD reflected Rastislav's sophisticated diplomatic strategy of balancing Frankish political pressure through the development of independent religious and cultural institutions. Archaeological evidence from Moravian religious centres reveals the rapid construction of elaborate churches and monastic complexes that served both spiritual and political functions, providing venues for diplomatic negotiations while demonstrating Moravian cultural sophistication to foreign visitors. The development of Slavic liturgy and the creation of the Glagolitic script enabled the production of legal codes, administrative documents, and literary works that established Great Moravia as a centre of Slavic cultural development. The emergence of early Polish principalities during the 9th century proceeded through the gradual consolidation of tribal territories in the Vistula and Oder river basins under increasingly powerful local rulers. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of fortified centres at strategic locations like Gniezno and Poznan that served as focal points for territorial integration and administrative development. The Polish political system developed through the systematic incorporation of neighbouring tribal groups into expanding confederations, with archaeological evidence indicating the peaceful integration of most communities rather than violent conquest. The development of Croatian principalities along the Adriatic coast represented a unique form of Slavic state formation that balanced Byzantine, Frankish, and indigenous influences while maintaining access to Mediterranean trade networks. Archaeological excavations at sites like Nin and Biograd reveal the construction of elaborate religious and administrative complexes that incorporated architectural elements from multiple cultural traditions while serving distinctively Slavic political and social functions. Croatian political organisation emphasised maritime capabilities and commercial relationships, with archaeological evidence indicating the development of sophisticated naval technologies and extensive trading relationships throughout the Mediterranean basin. The formation of Serbian principalities in the mountainous regions of the Central Balkans proceeded through the consolidation of clan-based territories under increasingly powerful local leaders who balanced Byzantine political influence with the maintenance of traditional Slavic social structures. Archaeological evidence from early Serbian centres reveals the development of fortified mountain strongholds that served both defensive and administrative functions, with complex systems of subsidiary settlements that controlled key river valleys and transportation routes. The Serbian political system preserved traditional assemblies and legal practices while developing diplomatic relationships with neighbouring powers that enabled territorial expansion and cultural development. These diverse approaches to Slavic state formation during the 8th and 9th centuries established political traditions and institutional frameworks that would influence European political development for centuries. The success of these early Slavic kingdoms in resisting Frankish expansion, challenging Byzantine authority, and developing independent cultural institutions demonstrated the political sophistication and military effectiveness of organised Slavic communities, fundamentally altering the balance of power across Central and Eastern Europe. The arrival of two Byzantine brothers at the court of Prince Rastislav of Great Moravia in 863 AD marked the beginning of the most profound cultural transformation in Slavic history. Constantine, later known as Cyril, and his brother Methodius carried with them not merely the Christian faith, but the revolutionary concept that divine worship could be conducted in the vernacular language of the people, rather than exclusively in Greek or Latin. Their mission, ostensibly religious in nature, possessed profound political implications that would reshape the cultural landscape of Central and Eastern Europe for centuries to come. Constantine's preparation for the Moravian mission had begun years earlier in the Imperial Library of Constantinople, where he'd undertaken the unprecedented task of creating a written script capable of accurately representing Slavic phonetic systems. The Glagolitic alphabet, consisting of 38 characters derived from Greek minuscule letters, combined with Hebrew and Armenian elements, represented a linguistic breakthrough that enabled precise transcription of Slavic sounds that had no equivalents in existing alphabetic systems. Archaeological discoveries of early Glagolitic inscriptions reveal the sophisticated nature of this writing system with carefully designed characters that accommodated the complex consonant clusters and vowel systems characteristic of 9th century Slavic dialects. The brothers' arrival in Moravia coincided with Rastislav's urgent need to establish religious independence from Frankish ecclesiastical authority, which had become increasingly intertwined with Carolingian political expansion into Slavic territories. Frankish missionaries had been active in Moravian territory since the early 9th century, but their insistence on Latin liturgy and their close association with Frankish political interests created resistance among Slavic populations who viewed religious conversion as potential cultural subjugation. Archaeological evidence from Moravian religious sites dating to this period reveals the coexistence of Christian symbols with traditional Slavic decorative motifs, suggesting incomplete acceptance of foreign religious practices. The translation of liturgical texts into Old Church Slavonic represented a monumental intellectual achievement that required not only linguistic expertise, but profound theological understanding. Constantine and Methodius began their work with the Gospel of John, chosen for its theological complexity and philosophical sophistication, which demonstrated that Slavic languages possessed the conceptual vocabulary necessary for expressing advanced Christian doctrine. The manuscript tradition preserves evidence of their meticulous approach to translation, with marginal notes indicating careful consideration of theological implications and linguistic precision in rendering Greek theological terminology into Slavic equivalents. The development of Old Church Slavonic as a liturgical language proceeded through systematic adaptation of existing Slavic vocabulary to express Christian theological concepts while creating new terms where no suitable words existed. Archaeological discoveries of early Slavonic manuscripts reveal the translators' innovative approaches to rendering complex theological ideas, including the creation of compound words that combined existing Slavic roots with new suffixes to express concepts like incarnation, transubstantiation, and consubstantiality. The resulting liturgical language maintained accessibility to ordinary Slavic speakers while achieving the precision necessary for theological discourse. The production of Slavonic liturgical books required the establishment of scriptoriums staffed by trained scribes capable of reproducing the complex glagolitic characters with consistency and accuracy. Archaeological evidence from Moravian monastic centres reveals the rapid development of book production facilities, with specialised workshops featuring writing desks, ink preparation areas, and parchment storage facilities. The scribes working in these scriptoriums developed distinctive calligraphic styles that combined Byzantine manuscript traditions with innovations necessitated by the unique characteristics of glagolitic letters. The spread of Slavonic liturgy throughout Great Moravia proceeded through systematic establishment of parish churches staffed by priests trained in the new liturgical practices. Archaeological excavations at rural church sites reveal standardized architectural plans that accommodated Slavonic liturgical requirements, including enlarged sanctuary areas designed for more elaborate ceremonial practices and acoustic features that enhance the audibility of vernacular chanting. The church buildings themselves represented architectural synthesis, combining Byzantine basilica designs with construction techniques derived from traditional Slavic timber building methods. Resistance to the Cyrillo-Methodian mission emerged primarily from Frankish clergy, who viewed vernacular liturgy as a dangerous precedent that threatened the universal authority of Latin Christianity. The theological controversy centred on the trilingual heresy, the assertion that divine worship could only be conducted in Hebrew, Greek, or Latin, the three languages of the inscription on Christ's cross. Archaeological evidence from Frankish ecclesiastical centres reveals the production of polemical texts arguing against vernacular liturgy, while corresponding Moravian sources preserve Slavonic responses defending the theological legitimacy of worship in the people's native language. The papal approval of Slavonic liturgy by Pope Adrian II in 867 AD represented a crucial diplomatic victory that legitimised the Cyrillo-Methodian mission while establishing precedent for vernacular worship throughout the Slavic world. The papal bull Industria Tuae, preserved in Vatican archives, explicitly authorised the use of Slavonic in liturgical contexts, while maintaining Latin as the language of ecclesiastical administration. This compromise solution enabled the continuation of the Moravian experiment while addressing Frankish concerns about liturgical uniformity and papal authority. The expansion of Slavonic Christianity beyond Great Moravia occurred through multiple channels that reflected the complex political relationships among emerging Slavic kingdoms. Bulgarian acceptance of Slavonic liturgy followed Khan Boris's strategic decision to balance Byzantine religious influence with the development of independent ecclesiastical institutions. Archaeological evidence from Bulgarian religious centres reveals the rapid adoption of glagolitic script for liturgical purposes, with local scriptoriums producing distinctively Bulgarian versions of Slavonic liturgical texts that incorporated regional linguistic variations while maintaining theological consistency with Moravian originals. The development of Cyrillic script in Bulgaria during the late 9th century represented a crucial evolution in Slavic literacy that enhanced the accessibility of written Slavonic while maintaining compatibility with existing manuscript traditions. The new alphabet, attributed to Clement of Ohrid and other disciples of Methodius, simplified the complex glagolitic characters while preserving their phonetic accuracy in representing Slavic sounds. Archaeological discoveries of transitional manuscripts reveal the gradual replacement of glagolitic with Cyrillic characters, with some texts displaying both scripts in parallel columns to facilitate the transition for existing readers. The establishment of the Preslav and Ohrid literary schools in Bulgaria created intellectual centres that advanced Slavonic theological and philosophical literature beyond simple liturgical translation. Archaeological evidence from these monastic centres reveals extensive library collections, advanced scriptoriums, and educational facilities that trained generations of Slavic clergy in theological scholarship. The literary production of these schools included original theological treatises, hagiographical works, and philosophical texts that demonstrated the intellectual sophistication achievable in Slavonic literary languages. The Christianization of Kievan Rus' under Prince Vladimir I in 988 AD represented the most politically significant expansion of Orthodox Christianity into Slavic territories, with consequences that extended far beyond religious conversion. Archaeological evidence from Kiev reveals extensive preparation for mass baptism, including the construction of temporary baptismal facilities along the Dnieper River, capable of accommodating thousands of converts simultaneously. The logistical complexity of converting an entire urban population required careful coordination between Byzantine clergy, local administrators, and military forces responsible for maintaining order during the ceremonies. Vladimir's decision to adopt Orthodox Christianity followed extensive diplomatic negotiations that balanced religious considerations with political and economic advantages. Archaeological evidence from the period reveals increased Byzantine influence in material culture, with the appearance of distinctively Byzantine architectural elements, decorative motifs, and craft techniques in Kievan archaeological assemblages. The construction of the Church of the Tithes, begun immediately after Vladimir's baptism, demonstrated the prince's commitment to establishing Christianity as the dominant religious force in his realm, while creating a monumental symbol of political alliance with Byzantium. The destruction of pagan temples and idols throughout Kievan territories proceeded systematically, with archaeological evidence revealing the deliberate dismantling of traditional religious sites and the construction of Christian churches on the same locations. Excavations at Perin, the former site of a major pagan sanctuary near Novgorod, reveal the careful burial of wooden idol fragments beneath the foundations of a new stone church, suggesting attempts to neutralize the spiritual power of pagan symbols while appropriating their sacred geography for Christian purposes. The resistance to Christianization in remote areas of Kievan Rus persisted for generations after Vladimir's official conversion, with archaeological evidence revealing the continued use of pagan burial practices, the maintenance of traditional religious symbols, and the preservation of pre-Christian ritual sites. Excavations in rural areas reveal mixed cemeteries where Christian and pagan burial practices coexisted, with some graves containing both Christian crosses and traditional pagan amulets, indicating the gradual nature of religious transformation among ordinary populations. The Christianization of Poland under Mieszko I in 966 AD followed a different pattern that emphasized political alliance with the Holy Roman Empire, while maintaining Polish independence from direct Frankish ecclesiastical control. Archaeological evidence from Gniezno reveals the construction of the elaborate church complexes that combined Ottonian architectural influences with local building traditions, creating distinctively Polish ecclesiastical architecture. The rapid establishment of bishoprics at Poznan, Wrocław, and Krakow demonstrated Mieszko's systematic approach to creating independent Polish ecclesiastical institutions. The conversion of Bulgaria under Khan Boris I between 864 and 870 AD involved complex diplomatic maneuvering between Rome and Constantinople, that ultimately established Bulgaria's ecclesiastical independence while maintaining political autonomy. Archaeological evidence from the period reveals the construction of numerous churches throughout Bulgarian territories, with architectural styles that combined Byzantine basilica designs with local building techniques adapted to Bulgarian environmental conditions. The Pliska Preslav complex reveals the systematic transformation of the Bulgarian capital from a pagan administrative centre to a Christian ecclesiastical hub. The syncretic practices that emerged during the Christianization process reflected the gradual integration of Christian beliefs with existing Slavic religious traditions rather than their complete replacement. Archaeological evidence reveals the continued veneration of sacred groves, springs and stones within Christianized contexts, with churches built adjacent to traditional sacred sites to facilitate religious transition. Excavations at rural church sites reveal the incorporation of pre-Christian symbols into Christian decorative programs, including solar motifs, tree-of-life designs and animal figures that maintained connections to traditional Slavic cosmology. The role of female religious figures in facilitating Slavic Christianization proved crucial in societies where women held significant influence over household religious practices and child-rearing. Archaeological evidence reveals the rapid development of female monastic communities throughout Slavic territories, with excavations at sites like the Holy Saviour Monastery in Kiev revealing sophisticated religious complexes designed specifically for female religious communities. These institutions served not only spiritual functions, but also educational and charitable roles that enhanced Christian influence within Slavic society. The development of Slavic hagiographical traditions created literary models that combined Christian theological concepts with traditional Slavic cultural values and narrative structures. The lives of Saints Boris and Gleb, the first Slavic saints canonized by the Orthodox Church, established patterns of sanctity that emphasized passive resistance to evil and voluntary martyrdom, rather than the militant Christianity characteristic of Western European saints. Archaeological evidence from their cult sites reveals the rapid development of pilgrimage practices that combined Christian devotional activities with traditional Slavic approaches to sacred geography. The transformation of Slavic legal systems through Christian influence proceeded gradually, with church law supplementing rather than replacing traditional customary legal practices. Archaeological evidence from legal assemblies reveals the continued importance of traditional judicial procedures while incorporating Christian concepts of moral authority and divine justice. The development of written legal codes, such as the Russkaya Pravda and Kievan Rus, combined Slavic customary law with Byzantine legal principles and Christian ethical teachings. The economic impact of Christianization included the establishment of ecclesiastical estates, the development of monastic agricultural practices, and the creation of new trade relationships with Christian kingdoms. Archaeological evidence reveals the rapid expansion of monastic landholdings throughout Slavic territories, with monasteries serving as centres of agricultural innovation and technological transfer. The introduction of new crops, improved agricultural techniques, and specialised craft production enhanced economic productivity while creating surplus wealth that supported further religious and cultural development. The artistic transformation accompanying Christianization involved the adaptation of Byzantine artistic traditions to Slavic aesthetic preferences and available materials. Archaeological discoveries reveal the development of distinctively Slavic Christian art forms, including wooden church architecture, textile decorations, and metalwork that combined Christian iconographic programs with traditional Slavic decorative motifs. The frescoes at Bojana Church and similar sites demonstrate the sophisticated synthesis of Byzantine theological concepts with local artistic traditions that characterized mature Slavic Christian culture. The consolidation of power along the Dnieper River trade route under the emerging Rurik dynasty represented a fundamental transformation in East Slavic political organization that would establish the foundations for one of medieval Europe's most prosperous and culturally sophisticated states. The legendary invitation to Rurik and his Varangian brothers to rule over the quarrelling Slavic tribes of Novgorod in 862 AD, while shrouded in mythological elements, reflects the historical reality of Scandinavian military entrepreneurs establishing political control over existing Slavic commercial networks that connected the Baltic with the Black Sea. Archaeological evidence from Staraya Ladoga reveals the sophisticated nature of this early Varangian Slavic synthesis, with excavations uncovering workshops that produce distinctively hybrid artifacts combining Scandinavian metalworking techniques with Slavic decorative traditions. The settlement's strategic position at the confluence of the Volkhov River with Lake Ladoga enabled control over the crucial northern terminus of the trade route, while its fortifications, consisting of massive earthwork ramparts reinforced with timber palisades, demonstrate the military engineering capabilities that enabled Varangian forces to establish dominance over much larger Slavic populations. Oleg's conquest of Kiev in 882 AD marked the decisive moment in the creation of a unified East Slavic state, as the Varangian prince systematically eliminated rival power centres while establishing Kiev as the political and commercial heart of his expanding realm. The primary chronicle's account of Oleg's deception of the Kievan rulers Askold and Dir, while possibly legendary in its specific details, reflects the brutal pragmatism that characterized early Rurikid political consolidation. Archaeological excavations in Kiev's Podol district reveal evidence of extensive reconstruction during this period, with the systematic demolition of earlier fortifications and the construction of new defensive works that incorporated both Scandinavian and Byzantine military engineering principles. The establishment of Kiev as the mother of Russian cities required massive infrastructure investments that transformed a modest Slavic trading settlement into a major urban centre capable of supporting a royal court, substantial military forces, and extensive commercial operations. Excavations along the Dnieper riverfront reveal the construction of elaborate dock facilities featuring stone quays, timber warehouses, and specialised workshops for processing goods transported along the trade route. The archaeological evidence indicates that these facilities could accommodate vessels ranging from small rivercraft to large Byzantine dromons, suggesting the sophisticated logistical capabilities that enabled Kiev's emergence as a major commercial hub. The expansion of Kievan authority under Oleg and his successors proceeded through systematic incorporation of Slavic tribal territories into a confederation that balanced local autonomy with centralized military and commercial control. Archaeological surveys across the Dnieper basin reveal the establishment of fortified administrative centers at strategic locations like Chernigov, Pereyaslav, and Smolensk, each featuring standardized defensive layouts and material culture assemblages that indicate coordinated planning and resource allocation. These regional centers served dual functions as military strongholds capable of defending against nomadic raids and as commercial nodes that facilitated trade between local producers and long-distance merchants. The reign of Igor witnessed the systematic development of tributary relationships with surrounding Slavic tribes that provided the economic foundation for Kievan expansion and military power. The primary chronicles' detailed accounts of Igor's tribute-collecting expeditions reveal the sophisticated administrative systems that enabled the extraction of resources from vast territories extending from the Baltic watersheds to the Black Sea steppes. Archaeological evidence from tribute-paying regions reveals standardized weights and measures, consistent pottery styles, and uniform metalworking techniques that suggest the development of integrated economic networks under Kievan coordination. The tragic death of Igor during a tribute-collecting expedition among the Drevlians in 945 AD demonstrated both the wealth-generating potential and inherent instability of the early Kievan tributary system. Archaeological excavations at Iskorostan, the Drevlian capital where Igor met his death, reveal evidence of a substantial fortified settlement featuring elaborate defensive earthworks and residential complexes that indicate significant local wealth and political organization. The Drevlian resistance to Kievan tribute demands reflected broader tensions between the expansionist policies of the Rurikid dynasty and the traditional autonomy of Slavic tribal confederations. Olga's regency following Igor's death marked a crucial period of administrative reform that transformed the chaotic tribute-collecting system into a more stable and predictable form of territorial administration. The establishment of pogosts, standardized collection points for tribute payments, represented a fundamental innovation in medieval European governance that balanced central authority with local administrative efficiency. Archaeological evidence from pogost sites reveals the construction of fortified complexes featuring administrative buildings, storage facilities, and residential quarters for royal officials, creating a network of governmental centres that extended Kievan authority throughout the realm's vast territories. The conversion of Olga to Christianity around 957 AD, while not immediately transforming Kievan religious practices, established crucial diplomatic relationships with Byzantium that would profoundly influence subsequent political and cultural development. Archaeological evidence from Kiev during Olga's reign reveals the appearance of Byzantine luxury goods, architectural elements, and craft techniques that indicate increasing cultural exchange with the imperial capital. The construction of the first stone churches in Kiev, while limited in scope during Olga's lifetime, demonstrated the technological capabilities and economic resources that would enable the massive building programs of later reigns. Sviatoslav's military campaigns represented the apex of early Kievan military power and demonstrated the effectiveness of the hybrid Varangian Slavic military system that combined Scandinavian tactical innovations with Slavic numerical superiority and logistical capabilities. The systematic destruction of the Khazar Khaganate between 964 and 966 AD eliminated the primary obstacle to Kievan expansion into the Volga basin while securing control over lucrative trade routes connecting Central Asia with European markets. Archaeological evidence from Sarkel and other former Khazar strongholds reveals the thoroughness of Sviatoslav's conquests, with fortification systems systematically dismantled and administrative centres abandoned following Kievan occupation. The Bulgarian campaigns of 967-971 AD demonstrated Sviatoslav's ambitions to establish Kievan hegemony over the entire Black Sea region while challenging Byzantine imperial authority in the Balkans. Archaeological evidence from the Danube campaign reveals the sophisticated logistical capabilities that enabled Kievan forces to maintain military operations hundreds of kilometres from their home territories. Weapon caches and military equipment recovered from Bulgarian battlefields indicate the standardized armaments and tactical coordination that characterized Sviatoslav's professional military forces, which combined heavily armed Varangian warriors with Slavic infantry formations and nomadic cavalry units recruited from the steppes. The establishment of Pereya-Slavets on the Danube as Sviatoslav's preferred capital reflected his vision of transforming Kiev from a regional power into the centre of a vast commercial and military empire extending from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. Archaeological excavations at presumed Pereya-Slavet sites reveal ambitious construction projects including palace complexes, fortification systems, and commercial facilities that would have rivaled contemporary Byzantine and Carolingian royal centres. The concentration of resources on Danubian expansion, however, left Kiev vulnerable to Pecheneg attacks that ultimately forced the abandonment of Bulgarian territories. Vladimir's consolidation of power following the civil war of 972-980 AD marked the beginning of the most prosperous and culturally significant period in Kievan history, as the new prince combined military effectiveness with sophisticated diplomatic strategies that established Kiev as a major European power. The elimination of his brothers Yaropolk and Oleg through systematic military campaigns demonstrated Vladimir's ruthless pragmatism, while his subsequent administrative reforms created governmental structures capable of managing the vast territories under Kievan control. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals massive construction projects throughout the realm, including the expansion of Kiev's fortifications, the establishment of new administrative centres, and the development of infrastructure projects that enhance commercial and military capabilities. The religious reforms initiated by Vladimir around 980 AD, including the establishment of a standardized pantheon of Slavic deities centered on Perun, represented systematic attempts to create ideological unity among the diverse populations within the Kievan realm. Archaeological excavations at the Perun sanctuary near Kiev reveal elaborate ritual complexes featuring massive wooden idols, sacrificial altars, and ceremonial spaces capable of accommodating thousands of participants. The archaeological evidence indicates that these religious reforms involved substantial resource investments and coordinated planning that extended throughout Kievan territories, suggesting their importance in Vladimir's broader political strategy. The conversion to Christianity in 988 AD fundamentally transformed Kievan political culture, while establishing diplomatic and commercial relationships that would define East Slavic civilization for centuries. The marriage alliance with Byzantine Emperor Basil II, sealed through Vladimir's baptism and subsequent marriage to Anna Porphyrogenita, represented the culmination of decades of diplomatic maneuvering that elevated Kiev to unprecedented international status. Archaeological evidence from the period reveals the rapid transformation of Kiev's urban landscape, with the construction of stone churches, the establishment of schools and scriptoriums, and the development of artistic workshops that produced distinctively Kievan Christian art. The economic prosperity that characterized Vladimir's reign resulted from the systematic development of the route from the Varangians to the Greeks, the commercial network that connected Scandinavian amber and furs with Byzantine silk and spices through Slavic river systems. Archaeological evidence reveals the sophisticated infrastructure that supported this trade, including the construction of portage facilities at river rapids, the establishment of merchant settlements at strategic locations, and the development of standardized weights, measures, and currency systems that facilitated commercial transactions across vast distances. The wealth generated by this trade enabled the massive construction projects and military expenditures that characterized the Kievan Golden Age. The reign of Yaroslav the Wise represented the cultural and political apex of Kievan civilization, as the prince systematically developed the intellectual, artistic, and legal institutions that would define East Slavic culture for centuries. The construction of St. Sophia Cathedral in Kiev, begun around 1037 AD, demonstrated the architectural ambitions and technical capabilities that characterized mature Kievan culture. Archaeological investigations of the cathedral's foundations reveal the sophisticated engineering solutions required to construct such a massive stone building on the challenging terrain of Kiev's upper city, including deep foundation systems, advanced mortar techniques, and complex structural supports that enable the creation of one of medieval Europe's most impressive religious monuments. The development of the Russkaya Pravda legal code under Yaroslav represented a fundamental achievement in medieval jurisprudence that systematically codified Slavic customary law, while incorporating Christian ethical principles and Byzantine legal concepts. Archaeological evidence from legal assembly sites reveals the continued importance of traditional judicial procedures, with excavated meeting places featuring stone circles, raised platforms for speakers, and elaborate seating arrangements that accommodated the complex social hierarchies involved in legal proceedings. The legal code itself, preserved in multiple manuscript traditions, reveals the sophisticated understanding of legal principles that characterized Kievan intellectual culture. The establishment of schools and scriptoriums, throughout the Kievan realm during Yaroslav's reign created the intellectual infrastructure that enabled the flourishing of Slavic literary culture and the preservation of historical records that provide crucial insights into medieval East Slavic society. Archaeological excavations at monastic centres reveal elaborate educational facilities featuring libraries, copying workshops, and specialised areas for manuscript illumination that produce some of medieval Europe's most sophisticated books. The primary chronicle, compiled during this period, represents not merely a historical record but a sophisticated work of literature that demonstrates the intellectual achievements possible in Old Church Slavonic. The architectural achievements of the Yaroslav period extended far beyond Kiev to include major construction projects throughout the Kievan realm that created a distinctive East Slavic architectural tradition, combining Byzantine structural principles with local building techniques and aesthetic preferences. The Golden Gate of Kiev, constructed around 1037 AD, featured sophisticated defensive and ceremonial functions that reflected the dual military and cultural priorities of Kievan urban planning. Archaeological investigations reveal the complex engineering required to construct such elaborate fortifications, including advanced foundation systems, sophisticated drainage networks, and decorative elements that rivaled contemporary Byzantine and Western European architectural achievements. The expansion of Christianity throughout the Kievan realm during Yaroslav's reign proceeded through systematic establishment of bishoprics, monasteries, and parish churches that created the institutional framework for East Slavic Orthodox culture. Archaeological evidence reveals the rapid construction of religious buildings throughout Kievan territories, with standardized architectural plans that adapted Byzantine basilica designs to local environmental conditions and building materials. The monastery of the Caves in Kiev, founded during this period, became the spiritual and intellectual center of East Slavic monasticism, while serving as a model for similar institutions throughout the realm. The international relationships developed during Yaroslav's reign established Kiev as a major European power, whose diplomatic influence extended from Scandinavia to Byzantium and from Poland to the Caspian Sea. Marriage alliances between Yaroslav's children and European royalty, including connections to the royal families of France, Hungary, Norway, and Poland, demonstrated Kiev's integration into the broader medieval European political system. Archaeological evidence from foreign courts reveals the presence of Kievan diplomatic gifts, including elaborate metalwork, furs, and religious artifacts that showcase the artistic achievements and economic prosperity of East Slavic civilization. The gradual political fragmentation that began following Yaroslav's death in 1054 AD resulted from the inherent tensions between the Hurricid system of collective dynastic rule and the practical requirements of governing vast territories with limited communication and transportation capabilities. The division of the realm among Yaroslav's sons, while intended to preserve family unity and territorial integrity, created competing power centres that gradually developed independent political and economic interests. Archaeological evidence from the later 11th century reveals the emergence of distinct regional material culture traditions that reflect the growing autonomy of individual principalities. The rise of Novgorod as an independent commercial and political centre represented a fundamental departure from traditional Kievan governmental structures, as the northern city developed republican institutions that balanced princely authority with merchant oligarchy and popular assemblies. Archaeological evidence from Novgorod's Veches site reveals the sophisticated political infrastructure that supported direct democratic participation in governmental decisions, including elaborate meeting facilities, voting procedures, and record-keeping systems that enabled effective governance of a major medieval city. The birch bark documents discovered in Novgorod provide unprecedented insights into the daily life, commercial practices, and political culture of medieval Slavic urban society. The development of the Vladimir Suzdal Principality under Yuri Dolgoruki and his successors created a new center of East Slavic political and cultural development that challenged Kiev's traditional hegemony while developing distinctive regional characteristics. Archaeological excavations at Vladimir reveal ambitious construction projects that rivaled contemporary Kievan achievements, including the Assumption Cathedral and the Golden Gate that demonstrated the principality's wealth and cultural sophistication. The systematic colonization of the Oka and Upper Volga river basins proceeded through coordinated settlement programs that established numerous fortified towns and agricultural communities throughout the region. The emergence of the Galicia-Volhynia Principality in the southwestern regions of the former Kievan realm created another major regional power that developed extensive commercial relationships with Central European kingdoms while maintaining connections to Byzantine cultural traditions. Archaeological evidence from Galician centres reveals the sophisticated material culture that characterized this border region, including distinctive architectural styles, craft techniques, and artistic traditions that combined East Slavic, Polish, Hungarian, and Byzantine influences. The Principality's strategic location enabled control over crucial trade routes connecting the Baltic with the Black Sea and Central Europe with the Byzantine Empire. The cultural achievements of the fragmented principalities during the 12th century demonstrated the continued vitality of East Slavic civilization despite political decentralization, with regional centres developing distinctive artistic, architectural, and literary traditions that enrich the broader cultural heritage. The construction of elaborate churches, the production of sophisticated manuscripts, and the development of regional schools of icon painting revealed the economic prosperity and cultural sophistication that characterized the mature phase of Kievan civilization. These achievements would provide crucial foundations for the eventual political reunification of East Slavic territories under new political formations that emerged following the Mongol conquests of the 13th century. The fragmentation of the Carolingian Empire during the late 9th century created a power vacuum in Central Europe that ambitious Slavic leaders systematically exploited to establish independent kingdoms capable of resisting both Germanic expansion and Magyar raids. The emergence of the Piast dynasty in Poland and the consolidation of Przemyslid authority in Bohemia represented sophisticated responses to the complex geopolitical challenges facing West Slavic populations, as tribal confederations transformed themselves into centralized monarchies equipped with professional armies, standardized administrative systems, and elaborate court cultures that rivaled their Ottonian and Capetian neighbours. The rise of Mieszko I to dominance over the Polish tribal confederations around 960 AD marked the culmination of decades of systematic territorial consolidation that had gradually unified the Vistula and Oder river basins under Piast authority. Archaeological evidence from Gniezno reveals the transformation of a modest tribal centre into an elaborate royal complex featuring multiple palace buildings, administrative structures, and defensive fortifications that enclosed an area of over 12 hectares. The excavated remains demonstrate sophisticated construction techniques, combining traditional Slavic timber framing methods with stone foundations and advanced drainage systems that enabled year-round occupation by substantial royal households and administrative staffs. Mieszko's military innovations revolutionized Slavic warfare through the systematic adoption of heavy cavalry formations modelled on Ottonian military practices, while maintaining traditional infantry strengths that had characterized earlier Polish tribal armies. Archaeological discoveries from weapon caches at Gietz and other Piast strongholds reveal standardized spear points, sword blades, and defensive equipment produced in centralized workshops that supplied uniformly equipped military units throughout the expanding realm. The presence of specialized horse equipment, including elaborate bridles, saddles, and stirrups, manufactured according to Western European specifications, indicates the systematic development of professional cavalry forces capable of confronting Ottonian heavy horsemen on equal terms. The expansion of Piast authority eastward into the territories of the Vistulans and other Slavic tribes proceeded through carefully coordinated military campaigns that combined direct conquest with diplomatic marriages and tributary arrangements. Excavations at Krakow reveal evidence of systematic urban planning during the Piast occupation, with the construction of new fortifications, administrative buildings, and craft workshops that transformed the former Vistulan capital into a major regional centre. The archaeological assemblages from this period display the rapid integration of diverse tribal territories into a unified political system, with standardised pottery styles, metalworking techniques, and architectural elements appearing simultaneously across vast distances. The marriage of Mieszko de Dobrawa of Bohemia in 965 AD represented a crucial diplomatic alliance that provided the Polish ruler with essential military support against Saxon expansion, while establishing the political preconditions for his subsequent conversion to Christianity. Archaeological evidence from the period reveals increased Bohemian influence in Polish material culture, with the appearance of distinctively Bohemian ceramic styles, metalworking techniques, and architectural elements in Piast centres. The alliance enabled coordinated resistance to Ottonian expansion that preserved Polish independence while facilitating the cultural exchanges that would profoundly influence subsequent Polish development. Mieszko's conversion to Christianity in 966 AD followed extensive diplomatic negotiations with both Rome and the Holy Roman Empire that secured papal recognition of Polish independence while establishing ecclesiastical structures that balanced imperial influence with royal autonomy. The rapid construction of churches throughout Polish territories, beginning with the cathedral at Poznan, demonstrated the systematic nature of the conversion process and the substantial resources that Mieszko devoted to establishing Christian institutions. Archaeological excavations at early Polish churches reveal architectural solutions that adapted Ottonian basilica designs to accommodate traditional Slavic assembly practices, creating distinctive ecclesiastical buildings that served both religious and political functions. The establishment of the Gniezno Archbishopric in 1000 AD during the Congress of Gniezno represented the culmination of Piast diplomatic efforts to secure ecclesiastical independence from German control while maintaining political autonomy within the broader framework of Latin Christendom. Emperor Otto III's pilgrimage to the tomb of St. Adalbert provided the ceremonial context for recognising Polish royal dignity and establishing ecclesiastical structures that enabled independent religious development. Archaeological evidence from Gniezno during this period reveals massive construction projects including the expansion of the cathedral, the construction of palatial complexes, and the establishment of craft workshops that produced luxury goods for the royal court and ecclesiastical institutions. Boleslaw of the Brave's assumption of the royal title around 1025 AD marked the transformation of Poland from a regional duchy into a major European kingdom capable of challenging imperial authority and competing with neighbouring monarchies for territorial dominance. The systematic expansion of Polish territory under Boleslaw included the conquest of Bohemia, the occupation of Kiev, and the acquisition of substantial territories in modern Slovakia and Hungary that created a vast Central European empire stretching from the Baltic to the Carpathians. Archaeological evidence from this expansion reveals the sophisticated logistical capabilities that enabled Polish forces to maintain military operations across vast distances while establishing administrative control over diverse populations. The development of Polish administrative systems during Boleslaw's reign created governmental structures that balanced central royal authority with regional autonomy through a network of castellanies that served both military and civil functions. Archaeological excavations at castellany centres reveal standardised fortification designs, administrative buildings, and craft workshops that indicate coordinated planning and resource allocation throughout the expanding realm. The castellans who governed these centres possessed both military and judicial authority, creating an integrated system of territorial administration that enabled effective control over vast areas with limited communication capabilities. The military confrontations between Boleslaw I and Emperor Henry II between 1002 and 1018 AD demonstrated the effectiveness of Polish military innovations and the kingdom's emergence as a major European power capable of resisting imperial expansion. The Battle of Crete in 1003 AD revealed the sophistication of Polish tactical coordination, with archaeological evidence from the battlefield indicating the deployment of combined infantry and cavalry formations that successfully countered traditional imperial military advantages. The subsequent sieges of Bautzen and other Saxon strongholds demonstrated Polish capabilities in siege warfare, with archaeological evidence revealing the use of advanced siege engines and coordinated assault techniques. The expansion of Polish territory into Rus's territories culminated in Boleslaw's occupation of Kiev in 1018 AD, an achievement that demonstrated Polish military capabilities while establishing the kingdom as a major power in Eastern European politics. Archaeological evidence from Kiev during the Polish occupation reveals the systematic integration of the city into Polish administrative structures, with the construction of new fortifications, the establishment of Polish garrisons, and the appointment of Polish administrators who maintained control over this crucial commercial centre. The brief duration of Polish control reflected the logistical challenges of maintaining authority over such distant territories, rather than military inadequacy. The consolidation of Przemyslid authority in Bohemia proceeded through different mechanisms that emphasize gradual territorial integration and the systematic development of administrative capabilities rather than rapid military expansion. The reign of Boleslaus I witnessed the systematic incorporation of Moravian territories into the expanding Bohemian Duchy, with archaeological evidence revealing the peaceful integration of former Great Moravian administrative centres into Przemyslid governmental structures. Excavations at Mikulcice and other former Moravian centres show continuity in settlement patterns and material culture that suggests negotiated incorporation rather than violent conquest. The development of Prague as the Przemyslid capital required massive infrastructure investments that transformed a modest hill fort into one of Central Europe's most impressive urban centres. Archaeological excavations at Prague Castle reveal the systematic expansion of fortifications, the construction of elaborate palace complexes, and the establishment of craft workshops that produced luxury goods for the royal court and international trade. The famous Rotunda of St. Vitus, constructed during the 10th century, demonstrates the sophisticated architectural capabilities that characterized mature Przemyslid court culture, while serving as a symbol of the dynasty's Christian identity and political legitimacy. Bohemian integration into the Holy Roman Empire as a duchy rather than a conquered territory enabled the Przemyslids to maintain substantial autonomy while benefiting from imperial protection against Magyar raids and Polish expansion. The ceremonial submission of Bohemian dukes to imperial authority, while politically significant, preserved practical independence in internal affairs and enabled the continued development of distinctively Bohemian political and cultural institutions. Archaeological evidence reveals the continued construction of Bohemian-style fortifications, the maintenance of traditional craft techniques, and the preservation of Slavic legal and administrative practices despite formal imperial overlordship. The reign of Boleslaus II marked a crucial period in Bohemian political development, as the duchy expanded its territorial control while developing the administrative and military capabilities necessary for effective governance of diverse populations. The systematic fortification of the Bohemian frontier included the construction of elaborate castle complexes at strategic locations like Karlstein and Krivoklat that served both defensive and administrative functions. Archaeological excavations at these sites reveal sophisticated defensive systems featuring multiple lines of fortification, elaborate gate complexes, and residential quarters that accommodated substantial garrisons and administrative staffs. The economic foundations of both Polish and Bohemian political development rested on the systematic exploitation of silver deposits that provided the monetary resources necessary for maintaining professional armies, constructing elaborate fortifications, and supporting sophisticated court cultures. The discovery and development of silver mines at Kutna Hora in Bohemia during the late 10th century created unprecedented wealth that enabled massive construction projects and military expenditures. Archaeological evidence from mining sites reveals advanced extraction techniques, sophisticated processing facilities, and elaborate transportation networks that connected remote mining areas with major commercial centres. Polish silver mining operations in Silesia and Lesser Poland developed simultaneously with Bohemian extraction activities, creating competitive relationships that influenced broader political dynamics between the two kingdoms. The standardization of silver coinage in both realms facilitated commercial transactions while providing mechanisms for royal control over monetary policy and taxation. Archaeological discoveries of coin hoards throughout Central Europe reveal the extensive circulation of Polish and Bohemian silver currency, indicating the important role these kingdoms played in medieval European commercial networks. The development of urban centres throughout Polish and Bohemian territories proceeded through systematic royal policies that encouraged craft production, commercial activities, and population concentration in strategically located settlements. Archaeological excavations at emerging urban centres reveal planned layouts featuring market squares, craft districts, and residential quarters that accommodated diverse populations, including merchants, artisans, and agricultural workers. The construction of urban fortifications, churches, and administrative buildings demonstrated royal investment in urban development, while providing the infrastructure necessary for commercial and political activities. Agricultural expansion in both kingdoms involved the systematic clearance of forest lands and the establishment of new settlements that increased agricultural production while extending royal authority into previously marginal territories. Archaeological evidence reveals the use of advanced ploughing techniques, improved crop rotation systems, and sophisticated drainage methods that enhanced agricultural productivity throughout Central Europe. The establishment of rural parishes and the construction of village churches provided religious services while extending royal and ecclesiastical authority into remote areas. The cultural development of Polish and Bohemian court societies during the 11th and 12th centuries created sophisticated artistic and intellectual traditions that rivaled contemporary achievements in France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire. Archaeological discoveries of illuminated manuscripts, elaborate metalwork, and sophisticated architectural decorations reveal the high levels of artistic achievement that characterized mature Piast and Premyslid court cultures. The establishment of cathedral schools and monastic educational institutions provided the intellectual infrastructure necessary for advanced scholarship and literary production. The transformation of Bohemia into a kingdom under Ottokar in 1198 AD represented the culmination of centuries of political development that had gradually enhanced Premyslid authority while maintaining beneficial relationships with the Holy Roman Empire. The Golden Bull of Sicily, issued by Emperor Frederick II in 1212 AD, formally recognised Bohemian royal status while confirming the kingdom's substantial autonomy within the imperial framework. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals massive construction projects throughout Bohemian territories, including the expansion of Prague Castle, the construction of new cathedrals, and the establishment of royal residences that demonstrated the kingdom's enhanced political status. The devastating Mongol invasions of 1241 to 1242 AD fundamentally disrupted the political and economic development of both Poland and Bohemia, while demonstrating the limitations of traditional medieval defensive strategies against nomadic warfare tactics. The Battle of Legnica in April 1241 AD resulted in the complete destruction of a combined Polish-German army under Duke Henry II the Pious, with archaeological evidence from the battlefield revealing the systematic nature of Mongol tactical coordination and the effectiveness of their composite bow technology against European heavy cavalry. The discovery of mass graves containing hundreds of warriors provides grim testimony to the scale of the military disaster that temporarily shattered Polish resistance. The Mongol siege of Wrocław demonstrated the systematic approach that characterized the invasion, with archaeological evidence revealing the complete destruction of the city's fortifications and the systematic burning of residential and commercial districts. The speed of Mongol operations prevented effective coordination of defensive efforts, while their superior mobility enabled the rapid concentration of forces against isolated strongholds. The archaeological record from invaded territories reveals the thoroughness of Mongol destruction, with evidence of systematic demolition of fortifications, the burning of urban centres, and the abandonment of rural settlements throughout the affected regions. The Mongol withdrawal from Central Europe following the death of Ogedai Khan in December 1241 AD provided crucial breathing space that enabled the reconstruction of Polish and Bohemian political structures, though the process required decades of sustained effort and substantial resource investments. Archaeological evidence from the reconstruction period reveals significant changes in settlement patterns, with new fortifications designed according to improved defensive principles and urban centres relocated to more defensible positions. The systematic strengthening of castle defences included the construction of stone keeps, the improvement of artillery positions, and the development of more sophisticated approaches to siege warfare. The political reorganisation that followed the Mongol invasions included significant changes in both Polish and Bohemian governmental structures that enhanced central authority while improving military coordination capabilities. The fragmentation of Poland into regional duchies during the 12th century had created vulnerabilities that the Mongol invasion had ruthlessly exploited, leading to renewed efforts at political unification under Pius leadership. Archaeological evidence reveals the systematic reconstruction of the administrative centres, the standardization of fortification designs, and the development of improved communication networks that enhanced governmental effectiveness throughout both kingdoms. The economic recovery from Mongol devastation proceeded through systematic policies that encouraged agricultural resettlement, urban reconstruction, and the revival of commercial activities that had been disrupted by the invasion. The introduction of German settlers into depopulated areas provided agricultural expertise and urban skills that accelerated recovery while creating more diverse populations in both kingdoms. Archaeological evidence reveals the rapid reconstruction of destroyed settlements, often with improved layouts and more sophisticated defensive capabilities that reflected lessons learned from the Mongol experience. The reconstruction of Bulgarian political power following the Byzantine reconquest of 971 AD required nearly half a century of patient preparation, as scattered Bulgarian nobles and military commanders maintained resistance networks throughout the mountainous regions of Macedonia and Thrace, while awaiting favourable circumstances for renewed independence. The harsh fiscal policies implemented by Byzantine administrators, particularly the excessive taxation imposed by John the Geometres and his successors, created widespread resentment among the Slavic population that provided crucial support for the eventual rebellion. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals the systematic abandonment of exposed settlements in favour of fortified mountain refuges, with excavations at sites like Prespa and Ohrid showing evidence of expanded defensive works and increased weapon production during the late 10th century. The revolt initiated by Peter Delian in 1040 AD demonstrated the persistence of Bulgarian national consciousness despite decades of Byzantine rule, though its ultimate failure revealed the military and organisational challenges facing any attempt to restore Bulgarian independence through purely internal resources. Archaeological evidence from rebel strongholds reveals sophisticated defensive preparations, including the construction of elaborate tunnel systems, the establishment of hidden weapon caches, and the development of communication networks that enabled coordination across vast mountainous territories. The discovery of standardized arrowheads and spear points at multiple rebel sites indicates centralized weapon production and distribution systems that suggest more systematic organization than Byzantine sources acknowledged. The emergence of the Asen brothers as leaders of a new Bulgarian independence movement during the 1180s reflected both the continuing vitality of Bulgarian political traditions and the strategic opportunities created by Byzantine military difficulties on multiple fronts. Archaeological excavations at Tarnovo reveal the systematic transformation of a modest fortress into an elaborate royal capital featuring multiple palace complexes, administrative buildings, and craft workshops that rivaled contemporary Byzantine and Western European urban centres. The construction techniques employed at Tarnovo combined traditional Bulgarian building methods with architectural innovations derived from both Byzantine and Western European sources, creating a distinctive synthesis that reflected the complex cultural influences shaping the Second Bulgarian Empire. The proclamation of the Second Bulgarian Empire by Ivan Essene I and Peter IV in 1185 AD occurred during the Third Crusade's disruption of Byzantine military resources, enabling the Bulgarian rebels to consolidate territorial control before imperial forces could mount effective counterattacks. The systematic capture of Byzantine fortresses throughout the Balkan Mountain proceeded through coordinated siege operations that demonstrated sophisticated military engineering capabilities, with archaeological evidence revealing the use of advanced siege engines, coordinated assault techniques, and elaborate supply systems that enabled sustained military operations across vast territories. The speed of Bulgarian territorial expansion during the initial rebellion phase indicates extensive prior preparation and the existence of underground networks that facilitated rapid mobilization of military resources. Kalian's assumption of the Bulgarian throne in 1197 AD marked the transformation of a regional rebellion into a major European power, capable of challenging both Byzantine imperial authority and the Latin Empire established by the Fourth Crusade. Archaeological evidence from Kaloyan's reign reveals massive construction projects throughout Bulgarian territories, including the expansion of Tarnovo's fortifications, the construction of new administrative centres, and the establishment of craft workshops that produced luxury goods for the royal court and international trade. The systematic strengthening of frontier fortifications included the construction of elaborate castle complexes at strategic locations like Cherven and Shumen that served both defensive and administrative functions, while demonstrating the kingdom's enhanced military capabilities. The diplomatic negotiations between Kaloyan and Pope Innocent III resulted in papal recognition of Bulgarian royal status and the establishment of an autonomous Bulgarian church that balanced Western ecclesiastical connections with traditional Orthodox practices. Archaeological discoveries of papal correspondence and ecclesiastical documents reveal the sophisticated nature of these diplomatic arrangements, which enabled Bulgaria to maintain religious independence while securing valuable political alliances with Western European powers. The construction of churches throughout Bulgarian territories during this period reveals architectural solutions that accommodated both Latin and Orthodox liturgical requirements, creating distinctive ecclesiastical buildings that reflected the kingdom's complex religious and political relationships. The Battle of Adrianople in 1205 AD demonstrated the military effectiveness of Bulgarian forces against the heavily armoured cavalry that had dominated European battlefields during the crusading period, with Kaloyan's combined infantry and cavalry formations systematically destroying the Latin Empire's most experienced military units. Archaeological evidence from the battlefield reveals the sophisticated tactical coordination that enabled Bulgarian forces to exploit the terrain advantages while maintaining discipline during prolonged combat operations. The discovery of elaborate horse equipment and weapons indicates that Bulgarian cavalry units possessed military technology comparable to their Western European opponents, while maintaining tactical flexibility that proved crucial in the mountainous Balkan terrain. The systematic destruction of Latin Empire military power through Bulgarian victories at Adrianople, Philippopolis, and other engagements fundamentally altered the balance of power in southeastern Europe while establishing the Second Bulgarian Empire as the dominant regional force. Archaeological evidence from captured Latin fortresses reveals the thoroughness of Bulgarian military operations, with systematic dismantling of defensive works and the establishment of Bulgarian garrisons equipped with standardized weapons and equipment. The rapid expansion of Bulgarian territorial control during this period indicates sophisticated administrative capabilities that enabled effective governance of diverse populations, while maintaining military pressure on multiple fronts. The reign of Ivanasin II represented the apex of Second Bulgarian Empire power and cultural achievement, as the kingdom expanded its territorial control from the Adriatic to the Black Sea, while developing sophisticated diplomatic relationships with major European powers. Archaeological excavations at Tarnovo during this period reveal the construction of elaborate palace complexes, the establishment of advanced craft workshops, and the development of educational institutions that rivaled contemporary achievements in Western Europe and Byzantium. The famous Boril Synodicon and other literary works produced during Ivanasin II's reign demonstrate the high levels of intellectual achievement that characterized mature Second Bulgarian Empire culture. The territorial expansion of the Second Bulgarian Empire under Ivanasin II included the systematic incorporation of Serbian, Albanian, and Greek territories that created a vast Balkan confederation stretching from the Danube to the Aegean Sea. Archaeological evidence reveals the sophisticated administrative systems that enabled effective governance of this diverse empire, with standardized fortification designs, consistent material culture assemblages, and uniform administrative practices appearing simultaneously across vast distances. The construction of royal residences at strategic locations throughout the empire provided focal points for regional administration, while demonstrating the kingdom's wealth and cultural sophistication to foreign visitors and potential allies. The development of Tarnovo as a major European capital during the 13th century required massive infrastructure investments that transformed the modest mountain fortress into an urban centre capable of supporting a sophisticated royal court, substantial military forces, and extensive commercial operations. Archaeological excavations reveal the systematic expansion of the city's fortifications, the construction of elaborate water supply systems, and the establishment of specialized craft districts that produced luxury goods for both domestic consumption and international trade. The famous Church of the 40 Martyrs, constructed to commemorate Ivan Asen II's victory over Theodore Komnenos at Klokotnitsa, demonstrates the architectural ambitions and technical capabilities that characterized mature Bulgarian court culture. The emergence of the Serbian state under Stefan Nemanja around 1166 AD represented a fundamental shift in Balkan political dynamics, as the former Byzantine provincial governor systematically consolidated control over Serbian tribal territories while developing independent political and military institutions. Archaeological evidence from Nemanja's reign reveals the rapid construction of fortified centres throughout Serbian territories, with excavations at Ras and other sites showing evidence of systematic urban planning and the establishment of administrative structures that enabled effective territorial control. The construction techniques employed during this period combined traditional Serbian building methods with architectural innovations derived from Byzantine and Western European sources. Stefan Nemanja's abdication in 1196 AD and his subsequent retirement to Mount Athos reflected the complex relationship between secular political authority and orthodox religious traditions that would characterize Serbian political culture throughout the medieval period. Archaeological evidence from Hilander Monastery reveals the substantial endowments that Nemanja provided for monastic institutions, including elaborate building projects, extensive land grants, and the establishment of educational facilities that served both religious and political functions. The development of Serbian monastic centres on Mount Athos created important diplomatic and cultural connections with the broad Orthodox world, while providing intellectual resources that enhanced Serbian governmental capabilities. The reign of Stefan I, crowned, witnessed the systematic development of Serbian royal institutions and the establishment of diplomatic relationships that secured papal recognition of Serbian independence while maintaining connections to Orthodox religious traditions. Archaeological excavations at Serbian royal centres reveal the construction of elaborate churches, the establishment of royal workshops, and the development of administrative facilities that enabled effective governance of the expanding Serbian territories. The famous Studenica monastery, founded by Stefan Nemanja and expanded by his successors, demonstrates the architectural achievements and religious devotion that characterized the Nemanjic dynasty, while serving as a symbol of Serbian political and cultural independence. The coronation of Stefan as King of Serbia by papal legate in 1217 AD represented the culmination of decades of diplomatic maneuvering that secured Western recognition of Serbian royal status, while preserving essential connections to Byzantine political and religious traditions. Archaeological evidence reveals the sophisticated nature of these diplomatic arrangements, with the construction of churches that accommodated both Latin and Orthodox liturgical requirements while maintaining distinctively Serbian architectural characteristics. The development of Serbian royal regalia and ceremonial practices combined Western European monarchical traditions with Byzantine imperial customs and indigenous Serbian political symbols. The establishment of the autonomous Serbian Orthodox Church under St. Sava in 1219 AD created the institutional framework for independent Serbian religious and cultural development, while providing crucial support for royal political authority. Archaeological excavations at Serbian monastic centres reveal the rapid expansion of religious institutions during this period, with the construction of elaborate monastery complexes, the establishment of scriptoriums and schools, and the development of distinctive Serbian ecclesiastical architectural styles. The production of religious manuscripts, legal codes, and historical chronicles in Serbian scriptoriums create the literary foundation for subsequent cultural development, while preserving crucial records of medieval Serbian political and social organisation. The territorial expansion of Serbia under Stefan Radoslav and Stefan Vladislav proceeded through systematic incorporation of neighbouring territories that extended Serbian control throughout much of the Central Balkans, while maintaining diplomatic relationships with major European powers. Archaeological evidence reveals the construction of fortified administrative centres at strategic locations throughout the expanding Serbian territories, with standardised defensive designs and material culture assemblages that indicate coordinated planning and resource allocation. The development of Serbian administrative systems during this period created governmental structures that balanced central royal authority with regional autonomy through networks of local nobles, who maintained both military and civil functions. The reign of Stefan Uros I marked a crucial period of Serbian political consolidation and economic development, as the kingdom systematically developed its mining resources while expanding territorial control and diplomatic influence throughout the Balkans. Archaeological evidence from Serbian mining sites reveals advanced extraction techniques, sophisticated processing facilities, and elaborate transportation networks that connected remote mining areas with major commercial centres. The wealth generated by silver and copper mining enabled massive construction projects, military expenditures, and diplomatic initiatives that enhanced Serbian political power while supporting sophisticated court culture. The development of Serbian urban centres during the 13th century proceeded through systematic royal policies that encouraged craft production, commercial activities, and population concentration in strategically located settlements. Archaeological excavations at emerging Serbian towns reveal planned layouts featuring market squares, craft districts, and fortified residential quarters that accommodated diverse populations including merchants, artisans, and military personnel. The construction of urban fortifications, churches, and administrative buildings demonstrated royal investment in urban development, while providing the infrastructure necessary for commercial and political activities that enhanced Serbian economic and military capabilities. The emergence of medieval Bosnia as an independent political entity during the 12th century reflected the complex religious and political dynamics that characterized the Central Balkans, where Catholic, Orthodox, and Bogomil influences created unique cultural synthesis patterns that differed markedly from neighbouring kingdoms. Archaeological evidence from early Bosnian centres reveals the coexistence of different religious traditions, with excavations showing churches built according to various architectural traditions and cemeteries containing burial practices that reflect diverse religious influences. The distinctive Stechi tombstones that characterize medieval Bosnian culture demonstrate the unique artistic and religious synthesis that developed in this border region between different Christian traditions. The consolidation of Bosnian political authority under Ban Kulin proceeded through diplomatic arrangements that balanced competing religious and political influences while maintaining practical independence from both Hungarian and Byzantine imperial authority. Archaeological excavations at Bosnian administrative centres reveal the construction of fortified complexes that combine defensive capabilities with ceremonial functions, creating distinctive architectural solutions that reflected the kingdom's unique political and religious circumstances. The development of Bosnian administrative systems during this period created governmental structures that accommodated diverse religious communities while maintaining effective territorial control and military coordination. The religious controversies surrounding the Bosnian Church reflected the complex theological and political dynamics that characterized medieval Bosnia, where Bogomil influences combined with Catholic and Orthodox traditions to create distinctive religious practices that attracted both supporters and critics throughout Europe. Archaeological evidence from Bosnian religious sites reveals the construction of churches that incorporated architectural elements from multiple traditions, while serving communities that maintained diverse theological beliefs and liturgical practices. The famous abjuration of Ban Kulin in 1203 AD demonstrates the diplomatic pressures that Bosnian rulers faced in managing relationships with papal authority while maintaining domestic religious diversity and political stability. The thunderous approach of Mongol cavalry across the frozen rivers of northeastern Rus in December 1237 shattered the relative peace that had characterized the fragmented principalities since the death of Vladimir Monomakh. Batu Khan's massive army, estimated by contemporary chroniclers at over 150,000 warriors, though likely numbering closer to 40,000 seasoned fighters supported by extensive auxiliary forces, represented the western arm of the greatest military machine the medieval world had ever witnessed. Archaeological evidence from the invasion routes reveals the systematic nature of Mongol preparations, with supply depots established at regular intervals and temporary camps positioned to facilitate rapid movement across the vast expanses of the Russian plain during the harsh winter months when frozen rivers provided natural highways for cavalry operations. The siege of Ryazan in December 1237 demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of Mongol siege warfare against traditional Russian fortifications, as the city's wooden palisades and earthwork defences proved utterly inadequate against the sophisticated artillery and coordinated assault techniques that had conquered cities from Beijing to Baghdad. Archaeological excavations at Ryazan reveal evidence of systematic destruction, with burned layers containing melted metal artifacts, charred timber remains, and mass burial sites that testify to the thoroughness of Mongol military operations. The discovery of Chinese-manufactured arrowheads and siege equipment components indicates the truly international character of Batu Khan's army, which incorporated military technologies and tactical innovations from across the Eurasian continent. The systematic destruction of Moscow in January 1238 eliminated what had been emerging as a significant regional centre under the leadership of Prince Yuri Dolgoruki's descendants, with archaeological evidence revealing the complete burning of the wooden Kremlin and the abandonment of the settlement for several years following the Mongol assault. Excavations in Moscow's historical centre have uncovered weapon caches buried during the siege, containing hundreds of iron spear points, arrowheads, and sword fragments that indicate desperate last-ditch resistance efforts by the city's defenders. The discovery of Mongol-style horse equipment and distinctive stirrups throughout the burned layers confirms the presence of substantial cavalry forces within the city during its final destruction. Vladimir, the political and cultural heart of northeastern Rus, suffered perhaps the most catastrophic destruction of the entire campaign, with the magnificent Cathedral of the Assumption serving as a final refuge for the princely family and hundreds of citizens who perished when Mongol forces set fire to the building in February 1238. Archaeological investigations around the cathedral have revealed evidence of systematic looting, with precious metal artifacts showing signs of deliberate removal and processing for transport back to Mongolia. The discovery of mass graves containing over 300 individuals, including women and children bearing evidence of violent deaths, provides grim testimony to the systematic nature of Mongol urban warfare tactics that prioritize psychological terror as much as military effectiveness. The Battle of the Sit River in March 1238 represented the final collapse of organized resistance in northeastern Rus, as Prince Yuri Vsevolodovic's hastily assembled army of regional militias proved incapable of withstanding Mongol tactical coordination and superior mobility. Archaeological evidence from the presumed battlefield site reveals the systematic deployment of Mongol forces, with weapon distributions indicating the classic feigned retreat and envelopment tactics that had proven effective against sedentary armies throughout Eurasia. The discovery of princely regalia and elaborate weaponry scattered across the battlefield suggests that the Russian military elite fought to the death rather than surrender, a pattern that would characterize Slavic resistance throughout the conquest period. Batu Khan's systematic advance toward Novgorod during the spring of 1238 represented perhaps the most crucial moment of the entire Western campaign, as the capture of this wealthy commercial centre would have provided the Mongols with unprecedented access to Baltic trade networks and Scandinavian silver resources. The famous decision to halt the advance approximately 100 kilometres from Novgorod, attributed by chroniclers to concerns about spring flooding and supply difficulties, more likely reflected careful strategic calculation about the costs and benefits of extending Mongol control into the northern forest regions, where cavalry operations would prove difficult and local resistance could persist indefinitely. Archaeological evidence from Mongol campsites along the approach routes reveals extensive preparations for siege operations, including the transport of heavy artillery and the establishment of supply depots that would have supported prolonged military operations. The southern campaign of 1240 to 1241 brought Mongol forces into direct confrontation with the ancient political and cultural centres of Kievan Rus, beginning with the systematic reduction of Pereyaslav and Chernigov that eliminated the defensive buffer protecting Kiev itself. Archaeological excavations at these sites reveal evidence of sophisticated siege preparations, including the construction of elaborate earthwork approaches that enabled Mongol artillery to target specific sections of city walls while providing cover for assault forces. The discovery of standardized siege equipment components at multiple sites indicates the systematic nature of Mongol military engineering, with prefabricated artillery pieces transported across vast distances and assembled according to standardized specifications. The siege of Kiev in November and December 1240 represented the climactic engagement of the Western Mongol campaign, as Batu Khan's forces systematically destroyed the political and cultural heart of East Slavic civilization through coordinated artillery bombardment and mass assault operations. Contemporary accounts describe the terrifying sound of Mongol siege engines, with chroniclers reporting that the creaking of ox carts, the shouting of commanders, and the lowing of cattle created such noise that conversation became impossible within the city. Archaeological evidence from Kiev's Podol district reveals the systematic nature of the destruction, with burned layers containing melted church bells, charred manuscript fragments, and architectural elements from destroyed buildings that indicate the complete devastation of the city's cultural and religious institutions. The capture and destruction of the Monastery of the Caves during the Kiev siege eliminated one of Orthodox Christianity's most important pilgrimage sites, while demonstrating Mongol willingness to target religious institutions that served as centres of political resistance. Archaeological investigations within the monastery complex have revealed evidence of systematic looting, with precious metal artefacts removed from churches and tombs, while architectural decorations were systematically stripped from buildings before their destruction. The discovery of hidden manuscript caches suggests that monastic communities attempted to preserve crucial texts and religious artifacts, though most such efforts proved unsuccessful against the thoroughness of Mongol search operations. The establishment of Mongol administrative control over conquered Rus's territories proceeded through systematic implementation of the decimal system that had proven effective throughout the Mongol Empire, with populations organized into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 for taxation and military recruitment purposes. Archaeological evidence from early Mongol administrative centers reveals the construction of standardized governmental facilities featuring audience halls, record storage areas, and residential quarters for Mongol officials and their local collaborators. The rapid establishment of communication networks connecting these administrative centers with Karakorum demonstrates the sophisticated bureaucratic capabilities that enabled effective governance of vast territories with relatively small numbers of Mongol administrators. The implementation of the tribute system required detailed population surveys and economic assessments that provided Mongol administrators with unprecedented knowledge of Slavic agricultural capabilities, craft production, and commercial resources. Archaeological discoveries of early tribute records, written in Mongolian script on birch bark and wooden tablets, reveal the systematic nature of these economic investigations and the substantial tribute burdens imposed on surviving populations. The standardization of weights and measures according to Mongol specifications facilitated tribute collection, while integrating Slavic territories into the broader imperial economic system that connected Europe with Central Asia and the Far East. The appointment of Mongol governors, known as baskaks, to supervise tribute collection and maintain political control, created parallel administrative structures that coexisted uneasily with traditional Slavic political institutions. Archaeological evidence from baskak residences reveals the construction of fortified compounds featuring Mongol-style architecture alongside facilities designed to accommodate local administrative practices. The discovery of bilingual administrative documents indicates the complex linguistic challenges involved in governing populations that spoke languages completely unrelated to Mongolian, necessitating the development of translation services and the training of multilingual administrative personnel. The survival and gradual recovery of the Orthodox Church during the early decades of Mongol rule reflected both Mongol religious tolerance policies and the Church's crucial role in maintaining cultural continuity among devastated Slavic populations. The famous meeting between Metropolitan Peter and Batu Khan, recorded in hagiographical sources, established the precedent for ecclesiastical exemption from tribute payments while securing church property rights that enabled the preservation of monastic institutions. Archaeological evidence from monastic centres during this period reveals continued construction activities, manuscript production, and educational functions that maintained intellectual and spiritual life despite political subjugation. The reconstruction of Kiev under Mongol supervision during the 1240s and 1250s proceeded according to drastically reduced specifications that reflected both population decline and changed political priorities, with the former capital transformed from a major European city into a modest regional centre. Archaeological excavations reveal the systematic reuse of materials from destroyed buildings, with stone blocks from ruined churches incorporated into new structures, while architectural decorations were recycled for practical rather than aesthetic purposes. The construction of new residential areas according to simplified plans indicates significant population decline, with large areas of the former city remaining uninhabited for decades following the conquest. The gradual emergence of Moscow as a regional administrative centre during the late 13th century reflected both its strategic location at the intersection of major river routes and the political acumen of its princes in managing relationships with Mongol authorities. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals systematic urban planning that created defensible administrative quarters while accommodating commercial activities that generated the wealth necessary for tribute payments. The construction of new wooden fortifications according to improved defensive principles demonstrates lessons learned from the conquest period, with multiple defensive lines and elaborate gate systems designed to delay rather than prevent enemy penetration. The reign of Ivan Kalita marked a crucial turning point in Moscow's relationship with the Golden Horde, as the prince's systematic cultivation of Mongol favour through reliable tribute collection and political cooperation secured his appointment as Grand Prince of Vladimir, with authority over other Rus' principalities. Archaeological evidence from Moscow during Ivan's reign reveals massive construction projects including the expansion of the Kremlin fortifications, the construction of stone churches, and the establishment of craft workshops that produced luxury goods for both local consumption and tribute payments. The accumulation of silver and gold artifacts in Muscovite archaeological assemblages indicates the substantial wealth that flowed through the city as a result of its privileged position within the Mongol administrative system. The transfer of the metropolitan see from Kiev to Moscow during the 1320s represented a crucial development in the Orthodox Church's adaptation to Mongol rule, while positioning Moscow as the spiritual centre of East Slavic Christianity. Archaeological excavations at the Cathedral of the Dormition reveal the sophisticated architectural planning that created a building capable of serving both local liturgical needs and the ceremonial requirements of the metropolitan's expanded jurisdiction. The discovery of elaborate ecclesiastical artifacts and manuscript fragments indicates the substantial resources devoted to establishing Moscow as a worthy successor to Kiev's former religious preeminence. The systematic weakening of Mongol military capabilities during the 14th century resulted from multiple factors including succession disputes within the Golden Horde, the gradual adoption of sedentary lifestyles by Mongol elites, and the increasing reliance on local auxiliary forces rather than traditional nomadic cavalry units. Archaeological evidence from Golden Horde administrative centres reveals the construction of permanent urban settlements featuring elaborate palaces, craft workshops, and commercial facilities that indicate the transformation of nomadic conquerors into settled administrators. The discovery of agricultural implements and evidence of crop cultivation at formerly nomadic camps demonstrates the fundamental changes in Mongol lifestyle that gradually reduced their military effectiveness. The emergence of Dmitry Donskoy as a leader capable of challenging Mongol military supremacy reflected both the growing confidence of Muscovite political leadership and the systematic development of military capabilities that could effectively counter traditional nomadic tactical advantages. The construction of stone fortifications at Moscow and other Muscovite centres created defensive positions that could withstand prolonged siege operations, while providing secure bases for military operations. Archaeological evidence reveals the standardization of weapons production throughout Muscovite territories, with centralized workshops producing spear points, arrowheads, and defensive equipment according to consistent specifications that enabled coordinated military formations. The Battle of Kulikovo in September 1380 represented the first major Muscovite military victory over Mongol forces, though archaeological evidence from the battlefield suggests a more complex engagement than traditional accounts indicate, with substantial casualties on both sides and tactical innovations by both armies. The discovery of weapons and equipment from the battle reveals the hybrid nature of late 14th century warfare, with traditional Mongol composite bows and cavalry equipment found alongside European-style crossbows, plate armour, and infantry weapons that indicate the technological synthesis that characterised this transitional period. The presence of Lithuanian and other Allied forces alongside Muscovite troops demonstrates the international character of resistance to Mongol authority. The systematic expansion of Muscovite territorial control during the late 14th and early 15th centuries proceeded through careful coordination of military pressure, diplomatic negotiation, and economic incentives that gradually incorporated neighbouring principalities into an expanding confederation under Moscow's leadership. Archaeological evidence from newly incorporated territories reveals the standardization of administrative practices, the construction of uniform fortification systems, and the development of communication networks that enabled effective coordination across vast distances. The establishment of Muscovite garrisons at strategic locations provided both defensive capabilities and symbols of political authority that reinforced Moscow's growing hegemony over northeastern Rus. The reign of Ivan III witnessed the systematic dismantling of Mongol political authority through a combination of military pressure, diplomatic manoeuvring, and economic warfare that gradually eliminated Golden Horde influence over Muscovite territories. The famous Great Stand on the Ugra River in 1480, while often portrayed as a decisive military confrontation, actually represented the culmination of decades of gradually declining Mongol capabilities and increasing Muscovite confidence. Archaeological evidence from the period reveals the substantial military preparations undertaken by both sides, with weapon caches and fortification remains indicating the serious nature of the confrontation despite its ultimately bloodless resolution. The formal rejection of tribute payments to the Golden Horde marked the end of over 2 centuries of Mongol domination, while establishing the foundation for subsequent Muscovite expansion that would eventually create the largest territorial state in world history. Archaeological evidence from this transitional period reveals the systematic transformation of former tribute collection centres into administrative facilities serving the expanding Muscovite state, with Mongol administrative buildings converted to serve orthodox ecclesiastical and secular governmental functions. The discovery of destroyed Mongol administrative documents alongside newly produced Muscovite legal codes indicates the deliberate nature of this political transformation and the systematic replacement of Mongol governmental practices with indigenous Slavic administrative traditions. The emergence of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania as the dominant power in Eastern Europe during the 14th century represented one of the most remarkable political transformations in medieval Slavic history, as a relatively small Baltic people systematically incorporated vast East Slavic territories into a confederation that would eventually stretch from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea steppes. The Lithuanian expansion into Slavic lands proceeded not through conquest and cultural imposition, but through a sophisticated system of political accommodation that preserved local administrative structures, religious practices, and legal traditions, while providing effective military protection against Mongol raids and Teutonic Knight expansion. Gediminas' reign witnessed the systematic incorporation of major Slavic principalities including Polotsk, Vitebsk, and substantial portions of the former Kievan territories through diplomatic marriages, military alliances, and strategic interventions in local succession disputes. Archaeological evidence from Lithuanian administrative centres reveals the construction of fortified compounds that combined Baltic timber construction techniques with Slavic defensive innovations, creating hybrid architectural solutions that accommodated both Lithuanian and Slavic governmental practices. The famous letters of Gediminas to Western European courts, written in Latin and Ruthenian scripts, demonstrate the sophisticated diplomatic capabilities that enabled Lithuania to balance relationships with the Pope, the Holy Roman Emperor, and various Slavic Orthodox hierarchs, while maintaining political independence and territorial expansion. The conversion policies pursued by Lithuanian rulers reflected pragmatic accommodation to the religious diversity within their expanding realm, rather than systematic Christianization efforts, with pagan Lithuanian traditions coexisting alongside Orthodox Christianity in Slavic territories, and Catholic influences in regions bordering Poland and the Teutonic Order. Archaeological excavations at Vilnius reveal the simultaneous construction of pagan temples, Orthodox churches, and Catholic chapels within the same urban complex, creating unique religious landscapes that accommodated the diverse spiritual needs of the duchy's multi-ethnic population. The preservation of traditional Lithuanian religious practices alongside Christian institutions enabled the maintenance of political legitimacy among Baltic populations, while avoiding conflicts with Slavic Orthodox communities that formed the majority of the duchy's inhabitants. Algirdas's military campaigns extended Lithuanian control deep into former Kievan territories, with successful expeditions reaching Kiev itself and establishing Lithuanian authority over vast regions of modern Ukraine and Belarus that had remained under Mongol influence for over a century. The systematic construction of fortified administrative centres throughout these newly incorporated territories proceeded according to standardised plans that combined Lithuanian defensive innovations with local building traditions, creating networks of strongholds capable of coordinating military operations across vast distances while maintaining effective communication with the central government in Vilnius. Archaeological evidence from these expansion period fortifications reveals sophisticated engineering solutions, including advanced drainage systems, elaborate gate complexes, and residential quarters designed to accommodate both Lithuanian administrators and local Slavic nobility. The Battle of Blue Waters in 1362 represented the decisive military engagement that established Lithuanian dominance over the western regions of the Golden Horde, as Algirdas's combined Lithuanian Slavic forces systematically destroyed Mongol military units that had maintained control over the Dnieper River basin for over a century. Archaeological investigations at the presumed battlefield site have revealed weapon distributions indicating the deployment of coordinated infantry and cavalry formations that successfully countered traditional Mongol tactical advantages through superior knowledge of local terrain and more effective use of defensive positions. The discovery of elaborate horse equipment and weapons from both armies demonstrates the technological sophistication that characterized late medieval Eastern European warfare, with Lithuanian forces employing Western European military innovations alongside traditional Slavic and Baltic fighting techniques. The incorporation of Orthodox Slavic territories into the Lithuanian political system required sophisticated administrative solutions that balanced Lithuanian political authority with the preservation of traditional Slavic legal and religious institutions. The development of the Lithuanian statute during the 15th century created legal frameworks that accommodated diverse legal traditions, while establishing unified governmental procedures for taxation, military service, and judicial administration. Archaeological evidence from regional administrative centres reveals the construction of court complexes, featuring separate facilities for Lithuanian, Slavic, and mixed legal proceedings, indicating the systematic nature of these accommodations and the commitment to maintaining local legal traditions within the broader Lithuanian political framework. The gradual Polonization of Lithuanian court culture during the late 14th century, accelerated by Jogaila's marriage to Queen Jadwiga of Poland in 1386, created complex cultural dynamics that influenced the development of both Lithuanian and Slavic political traditions within the expanding confederation. The Union of Kriwo established the personal union between Lithuania and Poland, while preserving Lithuanian territorial integrity and administrative autonomy, creating a unique political arrangement that would profoundly influence Central and Eastern European political development for centuries. Archaeological evidence from Vilnius during this period reveals the construction of the elaborate royal residences that combined Gothic architectural elements with traditional Lithuanian building techniques, creating distinctive hybrid styles that reflected the complex cultural influences shaping the unified realm. The systematic conversion of Lithuania to Catholicism following Jogaila's baptism proceeded through carefully managed policies that avoided direct confrontation with Orthodox populations, while establishing Catholic institutional structures throughout traditionally pagan regions. The construction of Catholic churches and monasteries according to Gothic architectural principles introduced Western European artistic and intellectual traditions into the Baltic region while creating educational institutions that trained administrative personnel capable of managing the increasingly complex governmental requirements of the expanded realm. Archaeological excavations at early Lithuanian Catholic centres reveal the rapid adoption of Western European craft techniques, particularly in metalworking and manuscript production, that enhanced the duchy's military and administrative capabilities while facilitating cultural exchange with Western European kingdoms. The fall of Constantinople to Ottoman forces on May 29, 1453, sent shockwaves throughout the Orthodox Slavic world that extended far beyond the immediate military and political consequences of Byzantine imperial collapse. The systematic Ottoman conquest of the ancient imperial capital, achieved through coordinated artillery, bombardment, and mass assault operations that overcame the famous Theodosian walls, demonstrated the effectiveness of gunpowder warfare against traditional medieval fortifications while establishing Ottoman dominance over the strategic passages between Europe and Asia. Archaeological evidence from Constantinople during the final siege reveals the desperate defensive preparations undertaken by the city's inhabitants, including the construction of makeshift barriers, the establishment of weapon workshops within churches and monasteries, and the systematic stripping of metal from buildings to produce ammunition for the city's limited artillery. The impact of Constantinople's fall on South Slavic territories under Ottoman expansion created profound psychological and political consequences that influenced resistance strategies and cultural development throughout the Balkans for centuries. The systematic Ottoman advance into Serbian territories following the conquest of Constantinople proceeded through coordinated military campaigns that combined traditional siege warfare with innovative artillery tactics, overwhelming the defensive capabilities of medieval Balkan fortifications that had successfully resisted earlier invasions. Archaeological evidence from Serbian strongholds captured during this period reveals the systematic adaptation of fortification designs to counter gunpowder weapons, with the construction of lower, thicker walls and the development of artillery positions designed to provide defensive fire against attacking forces. The Battle of Kosovo in 1389, while occurring over 60 years before Constantinople's fall, had established the pattern of Serbian resistance to Ottoman expansion that would characterize South Slavic responses to Turkish conquest throughout the 15th century. Archaeological investigations at the Kosovo battlefield have revealed evidence of a massive engagement involving thousands of combatants from across the Balkans, with weapon distributions indicating the participation of Serbian, Bosnian, Albanian, and other regional forces in a coordinated effort to halt Ottoman expansion into Central Europe. The discovery of elaborate military equipment and personal ornaments suggests that both armies included substantial numbers of noble warriors fighting alongside professional military units, creating casualty rates that devastated the military leadership of both sides and fundamentally altered the political balance throughout the region. The systematic Ottoman conquest of Serbian territories proceeded through the establishment of administrative structures that combined traditional Islamic governmental practices with accommodations to local Christian populations, creating unique synthesis patterns that enabled effective control over diverse religious and ethnic communities. The development of the Devshirme system, which recruited Christian boys for conversion to Islam and service in Ottoman administrative and military institutions, created pathways for social advancement that attracted some Slavic families while generating resistance among others who viewed the practice as a form of cultural genocide. Archaeological evidence from early Ottoman administrative centres in Serbian territories reveals the construction of complex urban facilities that accommodated both Islamic religious requirements and the practical needs of governing predominantly Christian populations. The persistence of Serbian Orthodox monasteries as centres of cultural resistance to Ottoman rule reflected both Islamic tolerance policies toward Christian institutions and the crucial role these religious communities played in preserving Slavic literary and artistic traditions during periods of political subjugation. Archaeological excavations at monasteries like Hilandar and Studenica reveal continued construction activities, manuscript production, and artistic creation throughout the Ottoman conquest period, indicating the substantial resources that Serbian communities devoted to maintaining their religious and cultural institutions despite political upheaval. The development of distinctive artistic styles that combine traditional Serbian Orthodox iconographic programs with influences derived from Islamic decorative traditions created unique cultural synthesis patterns that reflected the complex realities of life under Ottoman rule. The gradual expansion of Ottoman control throughout the Balkans eliminated the last independent South Slavic political entities, while creating new forms of cultural and religious accommodation that would characterize the region for centuries. The conquest of Bosnia in 1463 and Herzegovina in 1482 completed Ottoman control over the Central Balkans, while demonstrating the effectiveness of coordinated military operations that combined traditional siege warfare with diplomatic negotiations designed to minimize resistance and facilitate political integration. Archaeological evidence from Bosnian towns captured during this period reveals the systematic transformation of urban centers to accommodate Ottoman administrative requirements, with the construction of mosques, bazaars, and governmental buildings according to Islamic architectural principles, while preserving existing residential and commercial structures that served local populations. The conversion of substantial numbers of Bosnian Slavs to Islam during the Ottoman conquest period created unique religious and cultural dynamics that distinguished Bosnia from other conquered Slavic territories where Orthodox or Catholic Christianity remained dominant. The reasons for this widespread conversion remain debated among historians, with explanations ranging from the influence of Bogomil religious traditions that may have facilitated acceptance of Islamic monotheism to practical considerations, including tax advantages and opportunities for social advancement within Ottoman administrative structures. Archaeological evidence from Bosnian Islamic institutions reveals the rapid construction of elaborate mosques, madrasas, and other religious facilities that indicate substantial investment in creating Islamic institutional structures while accommodating local architectural traditions and building techniques. The development of distinctive Slavic cultural traditions during the late medieval period reflected both the preservation of ancient artistic and literary heritage and creative adaptation to new political and religious circumstances that characterize the transitional nature of this historical moment. The Novgorod Icon School represented perhaps the most sophisticated achievement in medieval Slavic religious art, with painters like Andrei Rublev creating masterworks that combined traditional Byzantine iconographic programs with innovative artistic techniques that reflected distinctively Russian spiritual and aesthetic sensibilities. Archaeological discoveries of icon painting workshops reveal the sophisticated technical knowledge required for these artistic achievements, including the preparation of specialized pigments, the development of advanced painting techniques, and the creation of wooden panels according to precise specifications that enabled the production of durable artworks capable of surviving centuries of use and veneration. The construction of Gothic cathedrals in Bohemia during the 14th and 15th centuries demonstrated the successful integration of Western European architectural innovations with local building traditions and aesthetic preferences, creating distinctive synthesis patterns that reflected the complex cultural influences shaping Central European Slavic societies. The famous Cathedral of St. Vitus in Prague, begun under Charles IV and continued by his successors, represents one of the most ambitious architectural projects undertaken in medieval Central Europe, with construction techniques that incorporated advanced Gothic engineering principles while accommodating the specific liturgical and ceremonial requirements of Bohemian royal and religious institutions. Archaeological investigations of the cathedral's construction phases reveal the international character of the building project, with master craftsmen from France, Germany, and other Western European regions working alongside local artisans to create architectural solutions that combined imported technical knowledge with indigenous artistic traditions. The development of Slavic literary traditions during this period reflected both the preservation of ancient cultural heritage and creative responses to new intellectual and spiritual challenges posed by political fragmentation, foreign conquest, and religious transformation. The compilation of the primary chronicle and other historical works in Kievan Rus created literary foundations that would influence East Slavic historical consciousness for centuries, while the development of vernacular literature in Poland, Bohemia, and other Western Slavic territories demonstrated the sophisticated intellectual capabilities that characterized mature medieval Slavic culture. Archaeological discoveries of scriptoriums and libraries reveal the substantial resources that Slavic communities devoted to manuscript production, book collection, and educational activities that preserved classical learning while creating new forms of literary expression adapted to local cultural needs and aesthetic preferences. The social and economic transformations that characterize late medieval Slavic societies reflected broader European trends toward increased social stratification, agricultural intensification, and commercial development while maintaining distinctive characteristics that reflected specific historical experiences and cultural traditions. The rise of serfdom in Eastern Europe proceeded through gradual legal and economic changes that restricted peasant mobility while increasing noble control over agricultural production, creating social structures that would persist for centuries and fundamentally shape the development of modern Eastern European societies. Archaeological evidence from rural settlements reveals the systematic transformation of village layouts, with the construction of manor houses, the reorganization of agricultural facilities, and changes in residential patterns that reflect the increasing social distance between noble landowners and peasant cultivators. Urban development in Western Slavic territories followed patterns that paralleled broader European trends towards commercial growth and craft specialization, while maintaining distinctive characteristics that reflected local political and cultural traditions. The expansion of Prague, Krakow, and other major centres during the 14th and 15th centuries required massive infrastructure investments that created sophisticated urban environments capable of supporting diverse populations engaged in commercial, artisanal, and administrative activities. Archaeological excavations in these urban centres reveal the systematic development of market districts, craft quarters, and residential areas that accommodated different social classes while providing the physical infrastructure necessary for complex economic and political activities. The persistence of clan-based societies in mountainous regions of the Balkans reflected both the geographic challenges of extending centralized governmental control over difficult terrain and the strength of traditional social institutions that had developed over centuries of adaptation to local environmental and political conditions. Archaeological evidence from highland settlements reveals the continued importance of fortified family compounds, communal agricultural practices, and traditional craft production techniques that enabled these communities to maintain substantial autonomy despite nominal subjection to various imperial authorities. The development of distinctive architectural styles, decorative traditions, and social customs in these regions created cultural landscapes that preserved ancient Slavic traditions while adapting to the practical requirements of survival in challenging geographic and political environments. The transformation of medieval Slavic societies during the 14th and 15th centuries established the foundations for the early modern period that would witness the emergence of powerful centralized states, the systematic colonization of vast territories, and the development of distinctive cultural traditions that would influence European and world history for centuries to come. The complex political arrangements, cultural syntheses, and social institutions developed during this transitional period provided crucial precedents for subsequent political development, while preserving essential elements of Slavic cultural heritage that would continue to influence art, literature, religion, and social organization throughout the modern era. The resilience demonstrated by Slavic communities in adapting to conquest, political fragmentation, and cultural transformation, while maintaining essential elements of their distinctive identity, established patterns of cultural continuity and adaptation that would characterize Slavic responses to subsequent historical challenges and opportunities. As the medieval period drew to a close around 1500 AD, the Slavic peoples had established themselves as one of Europe's most significant demographic and cultural forces, occupying territories that stretch from the Elbe River to the Pacific Ocean and from the Arctic tundra to the Mediterranean coast. Their political entities range from the emerging Russian Empire under Ivan the Great to the sophisticated Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, from the resilient mountain communities of the Balkans to the prosperous urban centres of Bohemia and Moravia. Despite centuries of conquest, fragmentation, and cultural transformation, the Slavic peoples had preserved essential elements of their linguistic, religious, and cultural heritage, while demonstrating remarkable adaptability to changing political and social circumstances. The foundations established during this medieval twilight would support the dramatic expansion and cultural flowering that would characterize the Slavic world during the early modern period, establishing these peoples as enduring and influential participants in European and world civilization.